Yes, it's true. Thanks to your aunt and her skill in trade and negotiations, Taijima praised, as a slight blush appeared on Naori's cheeks. Naruto looked nostalgically at his happy family and couldn't help but remember Izuna and how happy it would have been to see them all happy like this. He clenched his fists as he remembered the silver-haired Senju who killed his beloved elder brother. And he swore to kill that bastard, no matter what. By midnight, the convoy was ready. Taijima glanced at the wagons filled with provisions, money, and scrolls that authorized Naori to negotiate on behalf of the Uchiha clan with whomever she wished. His decisions would be binding on the entire clan, provided Taijima gave the go-ahead. The clan chief watched the 24 servants who would assist his sister with her daily, administrative, and service duties, along with the entire convoy in general. These were people who could not fight and were therefore trained to serve their superiors. Among the others were some prostitutes who entertained the guards as they pleased. While Taijima detested this practice, he also knew that men were weak when it came to money. Half of this convoy was made up of security forces, composed of some of the best Uchiha fighters. They were all good men and women who had loyally served Taijima, but even many of them needed personal pleasure. And it was better if they did it with the prostitutes of their own clan and not with some other enemy who could kill them on the spot or force them to reveal crucial information about the Uchiha. He checked the horses that would carry the supplies and the non-combatants. Since his journey would span the elemental nations, he had made sure to provide a horse for each warrior. While those magnificent creatures would only be used for long-distance travel, they could also be used in battle, but he doubted that any Uchiha would, as that would go against his pride in relying on a creature for help. He had forbidden the rest of the clan from coming to see these people off, so most of the people in this convoy, at least those who had families, had already said goodbye to their loved ones and friends. His gaze fell on a particular Uchiha that stood out from the others. Dressed in dazzling yet sturdy golden armor, with the dragon on his heart and the Uchiha emblem on his back, Naruto was a source of pride to Taijima. Her youngest son also wore a dark mask that hid his identity, and a similar black cape, which reached his waist, helped him fight the cold or cross the desert sands. The boy carried his clan's prestigious ancestral sword, firmly resting on his hip. He was currently giving final instructions to a group of boys named Itachi, Shursui, Kagami, and Takashi Uchiha, who would serve under him with the aim of acting as Naori's personal bodyguards. "It's something special, isn't it, brother?" Naori asked with a smile. "It is. Take care of him," Taijima asked, earning a firm assent from his dear sister. "I will," he promised. "And take care of yourself, too," Taijima urged her, which made her laugh, although not cruelly. "I'm not a child you used to take care of, brother," Naori chided playfully, causing Taijima to sigh, but he nodded. "I know." Naori hugged him and saw Madara doing the same while Naruto struggled to hold back the tears that threatened to fall from his eyes. "You have great children, Taijima. I will take care of Naruto. You do the same for Madara," Naori asked. "I promise," he said obediently. They both approached the boys who were finishing their hug, and thus heard Naruto's words spoken in a heavy voice. "Thank you, brother. For my life." Madara smiled and patted his little brother on the back. "Just be careful, or I'll on your grave," Madara warned, earning a laugh from Naruto. They were interrupted when they heard alarmed screams from the guards at the door. The family of four rushed over and saw the guards brandishing weapons at an approaching beast. Naruto's eyes widened, and so did the rest of his family. He found himself advancing quickly, beckoning the guards to stop, which they reluctantly did. Alone, he approached the beast, larger and taller than any horse his clan had ever owned. She stood tall and proud before him, her thick red hair glowing in the dark of night, her long legs and sharp fangs ready to tear apart her enemies. But it was those same demonic eyes that surprised him the most. "Kurama," whispered. The once monstrous fox, now reduced to the size of a large horse, looked at him expectantly. Naruto then noticed the threat, with his own companions waiting to kill the dangerous beast. He didn't know what made the fox get there, or how he managed to get so small. But he knew one thing. Kurama was a friend, and someone he had promised to protect. "He's with me," Naruto said earnestly, daring anyone to say otherwise. His father and aunt looked at him suspiciously, about to argue when a firm look from the boy forced them to shut up. Seeing that the clan leaders did not object, the guards withdrew, though Naruto doubted that they would not be happy if the fox tore him apart. Only Madara smiled as he approached and proudly patted his brother's back. "Little brother, you are a man of secrets. Where did you find this beast?" asked Madara curiously. "In the forests," Naruto replied dryly. Madara noticed her brother's tension and decided to let it go. Instead, he stared at the giant fox, for he had never seen a beast like this. Surprisingly, the beast growled and looked at him, which made Madara laugh. "A fighting creature. It looks good on you, brother," Madara praised. Naruto looked at Kurama for a long time, with thousands of questions hovering in his eyes, but remained silent, nodding his head. With the approval, Naruto climbed on the giant fox and sat down, earning a snort from Kurama, which made Madara laugh even more. He rode back to the gates of his clan, signaling his aunt to undertake the journey, to which she nodded and ordered the convoy to depart. Many men and women, alike, watched the Kingslayer sitting on that giant and dangerous fox. They were already afraid of him, and with the beast, Naruto doubted that his reputation would improve. Ignoring those looks and some flashes of anger, he made a respectful gesture to his father, who gave him a slight smile. Finally, he stared at Madara, who looked quite hurt. "Goodbye, brother. And so do you, little brother." With those last words and a final smile shared between brothers, Naruto rode forward riding his fox without looking back as his family and home became a blur in the distance. A dozen pairs of eyes watched the semi-large convoy through the dense forests. Although their first instinct was to attack, they did not have enough strength. And they wouldn't do such a thing because they were there solely to observe. "Is that the Kingslayer?" A young boy, dressed in heavy armor bearing the mark of his clan, asked. His elder brother, who had been hiding among the trees with him, observed the distinctive Uchiha riding at the front of the convoy on a giant fox that was larger than any horse and looked quite menacing. Tales of the Uchiha massacre had spread far and wide despite the efforts of the dragon's descendants to keep it a secret. While many sins and crimes were common in the elemental nations, the sin of killing one's own family was the greatest and was regarded with utter contempt in all clans except the Kagaya, who were considered completely insane. And Naruto Uchiha with his Sharingan, his rumored combat prowess, his acts of killing members of his own clan, and now with his dangerous fox, was quickly proving that he was a terrible and disgusting foe. However, Hashirama Senju's eyes widened when those same dark brown eyes looked at him. It was as if Naruto knew they were there, which caused Senior Senju to grab his sword, alarmed. "Are you looking at us, brother?" asked Tobirama in surprise. "I guess so. He seems to have sensory powers like you, Tobi," Hashirama whispered. "He's a kin killer," spat a soft, disgusted female voice. Hashirama looked at his second younger brother and sighed. Tsunade had always been an energetic girl, and just like her mother, she inherited the same bright blonde hair, the same brown eyes, and the same fair skin. One day she would become a great beauty, but like her mother, Tsunade fervently loved her family and its principles. And in his eyes, Naruto Uchiha was the worst scum on earth. He was responsible for the death of his older brother, Kawurama, in the battle between their clans that took place a year ago. Swanda never forgave the Uchiha for snatching her brother, who had cared for her all her life. In addition, it was because of Naruto and his clan members that Itama, who was hiding with them, lost an eye. Hashirama, Tobirama, and Itama watched their only sister look at the Kingslayer with utter contempt and hatred in her eyes. Not only was he responsible for harming his family, but he had further degraded himself in the eyes of the entire world, including Tsunade, by murdering his own people for power. He might be one of the strongest warriors, but in his eyes he was nothing more than a weak, power-hungry scum. "We should inform our father about his movements," Hashirama suggested, earning the nod of the other members of his clan hiding nearby. "Shouldn't we face them, brother? Together we can defeat the Kingslayer and free the Uchiha from their prized Sharingan," Tobirama suggested coldly, earning a withering glance from his brother. "We don't have the numbers, and I can feel that he won't give up without a fight. You killed his brother. He will not forget it," Hashirama warned. "I can handle him," Tobarama challenged with a withering look. "No." Tsunade and Itama shuddered at their older brother's harsh response, causing Tobarama to recoil with a gesture of resignation. As his small group of scouts began to retreat, his gaze locked on the man he hated. And he glanced at her out of the corner of her eye. "Murderer of relatives," he whispered bitterly, wishing to the gods that Hashirama had given him permission for the mere existence of this Uchiha to be an insult to Kawarama's memory. She didn't know how he knew where he was, but he had also chosen not to attack and instead gave her a playful wink in his direction. His infuriating smile only made her growl, but hearing Hashirama call out to her, she reluctantly turned and joined her brothers and clansmen. "One day I will do you justice, Kingslayer." 8 years later, Naori Uchiha stood on the walls of an ancient and proud castle of her clan. Considered one of their strongest strongholds in the Land of Fire, Tsukiyomi Castle was the pride of their clan. Built on top of a high mountain, it dared to reach for the heavens, with its lower levels divided into 7 long divisions, each with a wide forest. 10 times great armies of his enemies had attacked this castle, and 10 times they were defeated. More than half of those attacks had occurred in the past 8 years alone because the Uchiha had begun to do something that threatened their enemies. The dragons were gathering allies. And unlike the Senju, who were dedicated to enlisting the support of the largest and most powerful clans, the Uchiha had done the opposite. Instead of going after the big fish, the Uchiha, under Naori's leadership, had focused on the smaller clans and shinobi families that had lost their power. The results were quite unique for both sides. Today, the Senju clan was quite powerful across the board, whether it was power, money, or political influence. They had powerful allies: the Sarutobi clan, the Akimichi clan, and the Inazuka clan. Together, they represented the strongest alliance in the southern parts of the elemental nations. On the other hand, the Uchiha were still the largest clan, with more fighters than any other, even the Senju. They had forged great allies such as the Aburame, Shimura, Yuhi, Namikaze, Kurama, and many other smaller families. Together, these clans represented the largest and most cunning faction. But there were still many more clans that still had to choose sides. However, Naori knew it was inevitable. The gathering of such powerful factions on this scale was a clear indication of something inevitable: the Great Clan War. He had done his best to gather as many allies as possible for his people. Most of the smaller families who had lost their prestige had joined the Dragon's banner, for they all knew Madara's exploits. The heir of the clan had become one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, shinobi of the elemental nations. Someone that even the Senju didn't dare to attack openly unless they had the support of a powerful shinobi. Madara had become famous when, at the age of 13, the young Uchiha single-handedly defeated the entire Aburame clan in single combat, leading to his surrender and joining the Dragon Banner. Seeing an ancient and noble clan like the Aburame being defeated in such a way caused the remaining minor clans to quickly join the Uchiha. The Shimura clan enthusiastically joined together without asking for anything in return. However, the Yuhi, Namikaze, and Kurama clans had to be persuaded quite hard, along with fertile land to settle in Uchiha territory, and had joined the cause through marriages between their families and less powerful Uchiha families. Naori had done her best to strike the perfect balance. But it was not enough. Because if the Uchiha had Madara as their support, the Senju had their own hero. Hashirama Senju. Considered the most powerful shinobi of this era, Hashirama was the only one to face Madara in single combat, and not only survived, but forced him to draw. The Senju was highly respected in his clan, and it was his jovial and friendly character that encouraged powerful clans such as the Sarutobi, Inazuka, and Akimichi to join his cause. Madara had developed a personal rivalry with the Senju leader that only increased when Madara declared the dragon to be the official symbol of the Uchiha, apart from their ancestral fan. Hashirama retaliated in the same way by choosing antlers, a beautiful animal found in the forests, as the official symbol of the Senju, in addition to the Vajra that had been their symbol for thousands of years. She was distracted from her thoughts by the sound of steel crashing against the steel. Looking out over the training yard, he was glad to see his 6 bodyguards engaged in a fierce duel. The name of their group is inspired by that of their leader. Naori's gaze fell on the one with the longest, darkest hair, tied in a ponytail, as she finished making her hand stamps, unleashing a huge ball of fire. His dark eyes fell on his opponent as he unleashed the flaming jutsu. Of the 6, he was the best in the fire style and a master of shuriken jutsu. Itachi Uchiha was everything the Uchiha could ask of the new generation, a prodigy. Beside him, another boy with short, spiky black hair, with the same dark eyes, raised a finger, enveloping the entire training arena in darkness. Naori still found it hard to believe this Uchiha's talent with Jinjutsu, despite not having Sharingan, for he had created unshakable illusions in many of his enemies before annihilating them with his swift Shunshin. Shursui Uchiha was the most cunning and fastest of the group. A chakra blast dispelled the illusion before Kagami Uchiha mastered it. Moving forward, he engaged Itachi and Shursui in a fierce Taijutsu match, pushing back both talented boys. He was physically stronger than all the members of his group and as fast as a bird. The sound of steel colliding assaulted Naori's ears again as she watched the twins fiercely attack a fighter. Takashi and Mikoto were the newest members of the group. They were once servants, considered too weak to fight. But during one of the sieges of their castle, the twins took up arms and murdered 4 adult men together. Their act of courage and strength did not go unnoticed by the man fighting them, who decided to turn them into fighters and taught them everything he knew. Naori couldn't help but smile at the soon-to-be 15-year-old who had kept her safe all these years. Naruto Uchiha had made a name for himself in the elemental nations as the greatest swordsman. Dazzling with his golden armor, silky brown hair, and angelic features, he was an alluring sight. While his brother had made his enemies tremble with fear, Naruto was hated and belittled for his past actions. Many had dared to challenge him, the most prominent being the Fuma clan, who had attempted to take this castle only to be killed in single combat by Naruto himself. He still trembled as he remembered the day his nephew slaughtered the Fuma to their last limb with Dawn, their ancestral weapon that ended a noble family that had endured for thousands of years. The same boy blocked the twins' attack with his ancestral weapon before pushing them firmly. He smiled sarcastically as Kagami, Itachi, and Shursui joined Takashi and Mikoto. Everyone pointed their swords at him. "Even now I can cut them all 5 like I'm cutting a cake," the Kingslayer sneered. The kindred guard laughed at his comment, but still braced himself. Naori saw the group attack Naruto, which made him laugh as he activated his Sharingan and the battle began. Naori couldn't help but remember the time she thought that Naruto would never make friends because of his reputation. But, as always, it surprised her. Itachi, Shursui, and Kagami, despite being heirs to less powerful Uchiha families, had formed their own opinion of Naruto for the first 3 years, observing the Kingslayer and his actions. When Naruto proved his loyalty to the clan over and over again, the 3 boys reapplied to serve under Naruto in order to protect Naori's life. Naruto had agreed, as he had personally witnessed the 3 boys' prowess in combat. At the same time, against Naori's wishes, her nephew had recruited Takashi and Mikoto under his command. The twins were supposed to be servants, but Naruto took them under his wing and taught them to be ninjas. As the years passed, the group learned to work together and accept each other despite their different tastes and personalities. Kinsman Guard were called for their unwavering loyalty to their leader, the Kingslayer. Naruto chuckled as his kick hit Takashi's solar plexus, causing him to gasp and fall to the ground in pain. He delivered another quick roundhouse kick, causing Mikoto and Kagami to crash. It was Shursui and Itachi who slammed their swords into him, sparking everywhere. However, Naruto swung his longsword with enough force to disarm Shursui, leaving him exposed to Naruto's blow that connected with his jaw and sent him crashing as well. That only left the 2 brightest fighters of the Kindred Guard against each other. It was well known that Itachi admired Naruto for his combat skills. The boy had tried for years to defeat the Kingslayer in combat, but he was defeated daily. His goal of defeating Naruto in sword fighting kept eluding him. Itachi charged forward without a word, pointing his gun for a horizontal slash at Naruto's chest. The older Uchiha simply stepped aside before kicking Itachi in the knees, earning a growl of pain. Both boys fought fiercely again, but Naruto had a clear advantage with his Sharingan, and Naori could see that, despite Itachi's efforts, his nephew dominated him with ease. Naruto eventually got fed up and charged forward, feigning a punch to the right, causing Itachi to react to defend himself. The Kingslayer smiled victoriously, shifting his sword hand to his left and delivering a painful blow to Itachi's ribs, which caused him to bend over as Naruto placed his sword on his companion Uchiha's neck. "Even better than you," Naruto sneered, but without any arrogance or rancor in his voice, and instead offered his hand to Itachi when the boy made the reconciliation sign. "Someday I will defeat you, Lord Commander," Itachi replied confidently, causing Naruto to groan at the title. "How many times have I told you not to call me that?" asked Naruto irritably. A frown appeared on his lips as Itachi blinked in confusion. "You are our leader. It is up to me to address you because of your position." Brief laughter could be heard as the rest of the Kingsguard approached and surrounded the two boys. It was Shui who spoke first. "Leave it, Naruto. You'll find it easier to make the Senju give up instead of making Itachi relax a bit with traditions," Shui joked, earning a faint glance from Itachi. "How's your stomach, Takashi?" asked Kagami humorlessly, earning a growl from the young man. "You?" Naruto chuckled at the playful banter between his friends as they teased each other. Friends. He looked at each one of them and couldn't help but be glad to have them in his life. After his past, he had given up hope of finding someone who would appreciate him. Most of the world still hated him. But these five had overcome hatred and their past, formed their own judgment, and risked believing in it. He looked at the lazy fox pretending to sleep in a nearby corner and couldn't help but smile proudly, because these people around him were proof of his claim that not all Uchiha were bad or just crazy as the beast considered. Naruto still found it hard to believe that Kurama had decided to travel with him. The only reason the beast had given for such an action was that the Hagoromo and Kagaya clans were looking for him, and that it was safer if he stayed by their side. When asked why, the fox simply replied that, despite their madness, the Uchiha were quite feared. Staying with them would help the beast keep an eye on them, while also staying out of human conflicts. But Naruto doubted that it was the whole truth, for Kurama was strong enough to stand up to anyone who threatened him. He liked to believe that the fox was with him because they were friends. Aside from the kinsman guard, his aunt, the fox had been his constant companion and protected anyone who tried to harm him. It was Naruto and Kurama together who eliminated the entire Fuma clan in single combat, a fact that still made the Uchiha proud and made them accept the beast into their ranks. "Do you ever rest?" She turned around and saw her aunt approaching the group with a smile on her beautiful face. When the rest of the kindred guard respectfully knelt down, Naruto did the same, but only for an instant, as Naori quickly grabbed him by the shoulders, causing him to look at her in puzzlement. "You are family. You never have to kneel before me," he said softly, making him look away. "I'm repudiated, Nuri-sama," Naruto said dryly, unable to contain his sadness over the matter. "Not for me." She looked at him in the eyes that looked so much like her mother's. "You are an Uchiha. You may not have our name, but you are of my blood." Naruto looked away, unable to hold his piercing gaze, which always made him feel like a child, even though he was already a man. About to turn 15, which was quite advanced in the short life of his world, Naori still made him feel like a child. And as frustrating as it was, it didn't change the fact that he was also endearing, because far from his father and older brother, Naruto still had family in his aunt, who had taken care of him all these years as if he were her own son. He watched her happily interact with her friends, praising them for their skills and pointing out their mistakes. And it was fair to say that people respected and loved her, which was the opposite of what most people thought of him. He was still lost in his own melancholy when Naori grabbed his arm and made him look at her. "Walk with me," he ordered, earning a quick nod from his nephew. Naruto said goodbye to his friends as he walked with his aunt, watching the rest of the group, busy with their tasks. Servants were seen toiling at work. The gunsmith was forging new swords. Guards guarded their stalls with full vigilance. The merchant sitting in a corner was offering various products from lands far and near, and prostitutes were present in a distant building, waiting for anyone who wanted to enjoy their services. As they walked through their castle, every man, woman, or child would stop to respectfully greet their aunt, even calling him Lord Commander because he was responsible for the security of this castle. But as soon as they turned their backs on him, those same people stared at him and whispered with a hatred evident in their voices. Murderer of relatives. He had grown accustomed to it over the years, smiling often at those withering glances and whispered mockery. But each time it felt like a stab in the heart, one that she would carry for the rest of her life, and nothing would ever change the stain on her honor and reputation. "Does it bother you?" Naori asked sadly, and she wasn't surprised when he gave her a mocking smile. "A dragon doesn't care about the sheep's opinion," Naruto replied so easily that he made her believe him, but his eyes told a different story. "Your eyes betray your pain, Naruto. They've always had a beautiful but sad, melancholy look on them," Naori whispered. He hesitated at her keen observation, still unaccustomed to her being able to read it like an open book when most people didn't. Or maybe it was the intense hatred that had him blind. "Poetic. I never thought that someone so beautiful could be so artistic," he praised with a smile, making her sigh wearily. "We have a visitor today," she said seriously, ignoring his sarcasm. "Who?" he asked, with no trace of joy in his voice and with a cold, attentive gaze. "Tsukumo Hatake." Despite her surprise, Naruto didn't hesitate and continued to walk beside her, and she could see that his sharp mind was analyzing the implications of this event. "He's a sworn ally of the Senju, isn't he?" asked Naruto curiously. "He is, as is the rest of his clan. But today he came to us for help," Naori revealed frankly. Most Uchiha would have exploded with anger at the actions of a known enemy, but not his nephew. She saw him close his eyes briefly, and when he spoke, she couldn't help but see her brother in him. "The Hatake clan are distant allies of the Senju. They have fought for them for nearly a century, but I have heard recent reports of discontent growing in their ranks, mainly due to the frequent land poaching carried out by the Sarutobi clan on their lands with the permission of the Senju. Something has changed," Naruto suggested. "Right, something has happened." By then, they had already arrived at their chambers, and Naruto saw a tall man, with pure silver hair that reached his shoulders and gray and defined eyes, waiting for him. The man was fully armed and carried a thin short sword and the symbol of his clan, an eagle, on his chest. People called him the White Fang. And he went straight to the point. "Have you made up your mind, Narisama?" asked Hatake dryly. The Uchiha woman smiled as she passed her nephew and leader Hatake before sitting down in her chair. When he spoke again, both men were shocked. "That's up to my nephew, Lord Tsukumo," Naori said with a hidden smile. Naruto stared blankly as the man turned to him. Judgment was evident in his hard eyes, but then his eyes drifted to the ancestral Uchiha sword, Dawn, on Naruto's hip, and he remembered something else. Naruto Uchiha. The 14-year-old boy knew that pronouncing his name was difficult for the older man, as people used to call him that. But Tsukumo was a clever man who needed help, and Naruto was glad to meet a leader who put aside his pride in his people, even if that same man looked at him with obvious disapproval in his eyes. "Mr. Hatake," he replied dryly. "You have asked for our help, Lord Tsukumo. And while it is true that I am the representative of my clan on behalf of my elder brother, it is my nephew who maintains command of our forces stationed here, so far from home. If she needs help, she should present her case," Naori ordered, surprising Naruto by staring at her. He was no longer heir or even an alternate, and even so, his aunt always liked to raise these political problems with him. Even now he was smiling amused, waiting for his decision while Lord Tsukumo looked at him impatiently. "Let's listen to it," Naruto said in a resigned voice. "The Yamanaka." Naruto didn't miss the hatred in the man's voice or the anger present in his gray eyes when he said the name of one of the noblest and most feared clans in the world. What about them? Naruto asked seriously. A week ago, Iwashi Yamanaka, the current heir of the clan, forcibly abducted my daughter from my home. I want her back, Tsukumo said bitterly. Naruto appreciated a man who got to the point without any unwanted conversation. The last I heard is that you are a sworn ally of the Senju clan, our enemies. Why don't you ask them for help in this matter? Asked Naruto seriously, glaring harshly at the clan leader. Don't you think I've tried, boy? Hashirama Senju asked for time to resolve this matter because his efforts to convince the Yamanaka to join his side are more important than my daughter's safety or the injustice committed against our clan, which has served Hashirama's family for generations. Tsukumo explained furiously. Naruto ignored the comment and walked towards the man. Despite his young age, he was tall enough to almost look him in the eye, and his armor only seemed to stiffen Tsukumo. And why would the Uchiha help a clan that has been our sworn enemy for generations? Our own side has tried to get the Yamanaka to join us. If we help them, we will simply force them to join the Senju. And the last time I checked it, the Yamanaka clan has more fighters than you, and your mental jutsu are more dangerous than your entire clan combined. Naruto explained sincerely, with a dangerous twinkle in his eye that made Tsukumo shudder. Naori drank her wine with a smile, very happy that her nephew had torn the enemy clan leader apart. He loved to observe his hidden potential, as Naruto was as skilled with words as he was with the sword. He would be a good leader. She watched proudly as anger and righteousness disappeared from Tsukumo's face, who now looked like a defeated man. It's true that we've been enemies, but when my sworn allies abandon me, I have no choice but to reach out to a faction that has the power to save my daughter. If I act against the Yamanaka, which I want to do, the Senju clan will destroy mine for hindering their great cause of gathering powerful allies. But my daughter, Tsukumo said briefly with an unpleasant grimace. Most people would have reacted favorably to the defenseless man's side, but Naori knew Madara would, for he was a man of action, thirsty for battle no matter the enemy. But Naruto was a different man, forged through the hardships and contempt he faced in his life, which made him see the world differently than his brother. I'm afraid we can't help you, Lord Tsukumo. Have a nice day. Tsukumo was speechless by the boy's decision, but looking into those stone-cold eyes reminded him of the fact that he was an Uchiha and that they were never known to be kind, merciful, or even fair to members of their own clan, much less those who belonged to other clans. He knew of this possibility, but he still hoped to gain support for his family and clan by manipulating the Uchiha's hatred of the Senju. But the Kingslayer was much more cunning than people believed. The boy could be a criminal, but he was dangerous. Tsukumo had seen it. He looked at Naori one last time waiting for an answer, but she shook her head regretfully, accepting her nephew's decision. Tired and defeated, Tsukumo turned around and began to walk away, but was forced to stop. Swear allegiance to my clan, and I promise to give you back your daughter, your lost lands, your stolen dignity, and make your enemies repent of their actions against you. Tsukumo turned quickly. His face was a mask of surprise and relief that he was even happier when he saw Naruto staring at him without blinking. I will personally lead this mission along with my King Guard and ensure that justice is served for both clans, Naruto promised. Naori said hesitantly, though she knew he was strong. Facing the Yamanaka clan alone with their kindred guard was not enough. What's more, it wasn't worth risking so much for the Hitaki clan, which barely numbered 300 warriors. Naruto looked at her with an ever-present conviction in his brown eyes. If we can't protect our potential allies, why should they protect us? Tsukumo watched as Naori nodded her head, but reluctantly gave her approval, which finally caused the golden-armored boy to begin his own march towards the exit. Murderer of relatives. Naruto stopped only to turn around and find Tsukumo staring at him, but with less disgust in his hard eyes. You're not the man I expected you to be, Tsukumo stated honestly, and saw a distant look present in the boy's eyes, probably because he remembered some memory from his past. Neither do I, Lord Tsukumo. The boy nodded briefly before leaving without looking back, his dark cloak attached to his armor, fluttering gracefully behind him. Tsukumo didn't know how long he stood there, staring at the door, for many things had changed for him in the last few minutes. Most importantly, He had misjudged a man. It was always said that not even the most powerful and deceitful ninjas could hide the betrayal or evil that lurked in their hearts if they were looked closely in the eye. Because the eyes were the reflection of a person's heart, and today he had seen the heart of Naruto Uchiha. He felt another presence come to his side and saw Naori staring at the same door with a sad look in her eyes. "Do you think I can do it?" asked Tsukumo finally, making the beautiful Uchiha smile. "He never makes empty promises. If he says he will, then he will," Naori assured, and watched the Hitaki clan chief close his eyes for several long moments before opening them again with the clarity present in those orbs. "If he manages to save my daughter without attracting the attention of the Yamanaka, Senju, or anyone else, I will officially join your side along with my clan. The Hitakis will fight for you. We are not a large clan, but we are proud. And we can fight as fiercely as any other great clan," Tsukumo promised, earning a nod from Naori. "Then, for the time being, until Naruto completes his mission, you will be our guest. Once the deal is made, we will make the treaty official, and while I have full faith in your integrity, I will remind you that a dragon never trusts easily and, if hurt, reduces its enemies to ashes," Naori said cryptically, with a chilling smile that made Tsukumo tremble as he remembered how Madara Uchiha, alone, he had decimated the Aburame clan in single combat. "And I had no intention of angering this dangerous man." Naori smiled when she understood his point, and when she saw the pure fear in Tsukumo's eyes, probably due to Madara's reputation for raining fire and blood on his enemies. Compared to him, Naruto was too merciful and accommodating. Something that people took for granted, including the man next to her. Tsukumo stiffened and stared in alarm as the woman next to him unleashed a dangerous amount of murderous aura directly on him. Her dark eyes locked into her soul with barely contained hatred and anger, completely erasing her previous image as a mere diplomat. And although Naori hadn't drawn any weapons against him, Tsukumo could sense the threat quite clearly. "We respect our allies and expect the same in return, Tsukumo Hitaki. Today you have insulted my nephew, and if you dare to repeat that or worse, you will not only annoy me, but also Madara Uchiha and Taijima Uchiha. Compared to them and me, Naruto Uchiha is much more merciful." "Got it?" he asked coldly. Then he saw it. The madness for which this clan was famous and feared. For there was no one who loved and no one who hated as fiercely as the Uchiha. And the same madness lurked in Naori's eyes as she looked at him menacingly, and he saw in her eyes that this woman would slaughter her entire clan if they harmed his. Compared to her, the look she had seen in Naruto's eyes was different. It was a look of melancholy and sadness hidden behind smiles or sarcastic humor for which he was famous. He possessed a strength that Tsukumo could see in his demeanor, but above all he was known for keeping his promises. Naruto was sitting among his personal guard, who were also his only friends in the world. Everyone looked at him with mixed expressions as he finished explaining the events that had occurred. "Do you want us to pass through Senju territory to attack a large clan like the Yamanaka on our own for the Hitaki clan?" Kagami asked in disbelief, summing up the thoughts of everyone else who was staring at Naruto blankly. "Naruto, your father has been trying to get an alliance with the Yamanaka for almost a year. If you do, it will all be in vain," Shursui warned, making his position on the matter clear. "Why the hell should we risk our lives and the future of our clan because of the Hitaki? They have been our enemies for nearly a century, responsible for the deaths of many of our ventilators. I would say they deserve what happened to them," Takashi said viciously. Naruto looked at the two silent members of his group, those who hadn't said anything yet, and although he valued everyone's opinion, he valued the opinion of these two even more. It was Itachi who looked at him with a gleam of complicity in his eyes. "Mr. Commander, I am with you." Naruto smiled sarcastically at his friend because he knew how to read between the lines, overcome impossibility and threats to see what could really be achieved. The opportunity of a lifetime. "Something tells me that you have a plan behind this. I'd like to hear it first before I give my opinion," Mikoto said candidly, earning a broad smile from the handsome Uchiha, who was quite happy to see her put rationality before emotions and fears. He looked at his opponent friends, who at least now were willing to listen to his idea, even if it was extremely crazy in their opinion. The Yamanaka will never join our side willingly, no matter what father does, Naruto stated honestly. Why? Kagami asked with a frown, causing Naruto to nod. Because our clans are too similar. The Uchiha are masters of manipulation with our Jinjutsu and Sharingan, and the Yamanaka are equal with their mind arts. When someone can control the will of another, they refuse to bow to someone similar who can do the same. The Yamanaka know that the Uchiha can counter their mental manipulation, however subtle, thus nullifying their chances of gaining an advantage over us. The Senju, on the other hand, are not as strong in the mental arts, and considering Hashirama's friendly and trusting nature, the Yamanaka will attempt to manipulate them from the shadows. It will be subtle and it may take time, but those mind walkers are willing to take the risk, Naruto explained seriously. Then why this farce of conversations with your father? If they really want to join the Senju, why don't they? Takashi asked irritably, the most irascible of them all and someone who hated politics of any kind, unlike his intelligent sister. To get the greatest possible benefit from the side they join, and at the same time show a false respect for the faction they choose not to join. It's a much bigger game. Itachi explained seriously, his face as expressionless as ever. They are dangerous. What should we do? Asked Kagami hesitantly. The chilling smile that came to Naruto's lips momentarily stopped all their hearts. It's time to hunt down a mind walker. 2 days later, Naori watched her nephew ride his monstrous fox as his remaining companions arrived at the courtyard. I could see it in his eyes, the thirst for battle. The only difference between him and Madara was that while the older one enjoyed killing, the younger one only enjoyed testing his limits against worthy enemies. But what made his young nephew more dangerous than anyone, even Madara, was the fact that Naruto was not afraid of death. He welcomed it, because it would free him from the hell that was his life and give him power over most people, because he didn't want money, power, or glory. He only wanted to redeem his disgraced name, however impossible it was. When he approached her, he lowered himself to the ground again, allowing her to kiss his forehead and cheeks. Be victorious, she whispered, unable to hide her concern, for she loved this boy as if he were her own. That fact was very clear the day his life changed forever. His words, so many years ago, about his abandonment during his early childhood had made her feel more guilty than all the lives he had taken. Because she could have chosen to love a child without a mother. And instead she decided to serve the clan believing that he would never remember her. But now he couldn't help but think about how things might have changed if she had been there for him. Would his life have been the same? Would he still be a pawn of his clan, of Taijima's ambition? It's bad to say goodbye to someone with tears before leaving for battle, he warned with that ever-present arrogant smile. She didn't respond and hugged him tightly as tears trickled down from her eyes. He was taller and stronger than she was now, and yet she wished to see him safe and happy from all those who wanted to harm him. Just be careful, and if things get too risky, come back, she whispered worriedly, and felt him stiffen in her embrace. We need this alliance, Naori, he said seriously. Not if it means getting lost or worse. He couldn't help but smile and kiss her forehead, for this beautiful woman had taken care of him more than his own father. There were very few for whom she felt anything, and she was one of them. I will not die. Not until I kill Tobirama Senju, Naruto said furiously, his hatred for the second Senju air seeping into his voice, making her grab him tighter. Promise me that you will not face the Senjus. Killing Tobirama won't cure your pain, Naori suggested, but shook her head. He took away from me the one I loved most in this world, and I will take away everything he loves before I end his miserable life, and only then will I join my brothers, he whispered hatefully. You still have a brother in this world, Naruto, and he loves you more than anything. His words made him hesitate as he remembered his brother who had challenged everyone for him, one who would not hesitate to burn the whole world for him. Madara has a father, and I have to avenge Izuna, he said stubbornly, making her break the embrace and look at him furiously. And what about me? Once again, this woman made him feel more guilty than anyone else. She looked away, for she could not hold his piercing gaze, which reflected so much anger, but also love for him. You should have been my mother. His heart was touched and broke at once to hear him say that, because hidden in those words was everything he felt for her and the place she occupied in his heart. Then promise me, he insisted fiercely. Naori, he sighed, but she grabbed his chin tightly, making him look into her eyes. Promise. Her defiant gaze fought against her fierce gaze, but she didn't break or flinch, causing him to finally sigh in defeat. Very good. I will not face the sun just, and will only focus on the mission. I promise. He smiled as pure relief flooded his face, and his eyes lost some of the unbearable tension he felt since he decided to accept this mission. While she had insisted that he take more men than just his kindred guard, he had refused because it wasn't necessary. And he liked to work with people he trusted. Come back to me unharmed and victorious, then I will give you a gift, he promised with a smile. He smiled smugly in response as he moved to mount his beastly fox, who simply stepped aside, causing Naruto, in his heavy armor, to fall face first to the ground. Naori and the rest of the kin guard laughed heartily as Naruto glared at the beast, which looked at him unapologetically. It was with this happy memory that she saw him leave and prayed silently for his safety. Dusk. The group of 6 Uchiha and a giant fox finally stopped their swift journey upon reaching the boundaries of their clan's territory. A few kilometers ahead, the borders of their most hated and dangerous enemy began, the Senju. All the squad members sensed the unspoken tension in the air as they saw Naruto's stern gaze fixed on the Senju borders. The hatred always present in his eyes, as his heart longed for the one thing he had always wanted: a chance to avenge her beloved brother. It was a strange paradox for Kurama, as the boy himself had remained loyal and devoted to the Uchiha clan even after all that was done to him. His love for his family exceeded the misfortune inflicted on him. And yet, at the same time, his hatred for Senju knew no bounds, and Kurama didn't doubt for a second the unspoken horrors Naruto was capable of inflicting just for a single chance at revenge. He was an Uchiha, and at the end of the day nothing would change that. But the beast was relieved when the boy sighed resignedly before looking away from the enemy borders and returning to his squad. If there was one thing that was certain about the boy, it was that he kept his promises, no matter what. And that Naori woman had used that for her own good. We'll camp here and set off at midnight, the kin killer ordered, earning the assent of his squad mates until Itachi presented a problem to his plan. Although we can move quickly in the dark, we are still exposed to detection. The Senju clan is known for its hidden traps and sensor patrols. Any mistake, and we will be surrounded in the blink of an eye, Itachi warned. It is a risk that we must take. I guess it's better that we are just a squad then, and not a small company like Narisama was suggesting, Kagami said honestly, but Takashi shook his head in protest. There is strength in unity. We could have used that extra help, if not to confront the Senju in case of trouble, at least against the Yamenka clan, which will have a considerable part of its fighters defending their homeland, Takashi said with a frown. Before anyone else could offer any more suggestions, Naruto's amused laugh once again attracted the attention of the group. Have you become senile, golden boy? Mikoto asked mischievously as she looked at her golden armor. Laughter and mockery erupted at her comment, while Naruto blushed and glared at her. Even Kurama snorted at the nickname that this woman always had for her friend. Shut up, Mikabaka, he retorted sharply, causing Mikoto's eyebrows to twitch violently as his twin brother laughed out loud. Seriously, guys, we're on a mission, you know, Itachi whispered in his usual melancholy tone. After a few more minutes of pointless bickering, Naruto finally managed to take control and looked at all his squad mates, including the lazy fox pretending to sleep in a nearby corner. Do you trust me? He asked seriously, his face losing all joviality. Do we have a choice? Replied Takashi, rolling his eyes and growling in pain as 2 loud blows struck his head courtesy of Mikoto and Kagami. We will, Mr. Commander, Itachi assured with a faint smile, causing Naruto to groan at the stupid nickname, earning another round of smiles and laughter from his group of crazy friends. Then I'll reveal our next action when the time is right, Naruto replied cryptically. Surprisingly, Kurama saw all the squad members nod in agreement as they cautiously looked around, clearly understanding Naruto's hidden message. Stay on guard. Biju could not help but agree with his friend's decision to remain silent, for even though they were still in allied territory, there was still a possibility that there were enemies lurking nearby, and it would be complete madness if his mission plan were explained openly. The same thing had happened during the preparations at his base, as there were many people that Naruto distrusted, even if they were Uchiha, and the Kingslayer was still suspicious of Tsukumo, so he refrained from explaining his strategy for rescuing the daughter of the Hitaki clan chief from the Yamanaka. And it was a testament to the loyalty and trust the Kindred Guard had in their leader that made them accept such a risky mission and still move forward without knowing their battle plan. They were risking their lives for Naruto Uchiha. And Kurama saw the determination in his friend's eyes to keep his loyal comrades safe. We have approximately 6 hours, so we will rest in shifts. I'll take the first one with Kagami. The other two are up to you to decide, Naruto advised, earning another round of affirmative nods from the squad. A few hours later, the sound of lips crashing echoed softly near the banks of the silent Naka River as two Uchiha entangled in a messy tangle of limbs lost themselves in each other's company. That was until one of them stopped receiving the penetrating gaze of the other. Naruto had the decency to feel guilty and looked apologetically at the beautiful woman lying beneath him, although his next words left him speechless. Do you like boys? Mikoto smiled sarcastically as he stammered a simple answer, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She sighed and let go of his embrace, much to his disappointment, but a quick glance from him made him raise his hands and surrender. She watched him remain silent and gaze longingly at the Naka River that flowed silently in front of them. Why are you hesitant to go further, Naruto? He asked softly, touching his arm with his hand, offering his support. Because I can't. I'm forbidden to do so, and I'll ruin your future if we go any further, he replied sincerely, causing her to grab his arm roughly. It doesn't matter, she said defiantly, pulling closer and leaving prolonged kisses on her cheeks and neck that made him sigh with pleasure. I care, she whispered, but he didn't stop her either. Mikoto finally stopped his actions and looked into his eyes that had always contained an endless sea of pain and suffering. You know what everyone calls me? Kingslayer, traitor. Everyone despises me. I don't want that for you because it will happen if we go further, not forgetting the trouble it will get my father and older brother into. She explained hesitantly, which made her sigh, but she grabbed his cheeks gently. She was a servant's daughter, you know? I was destined to be a prostitute until the Fuma clan attacked our castle, forcing me and my brother to defend ourselves. The guards rushed to protect the important nobles and heirs of minor Uchiha families, leaving us alone. We fought as best we could, even killing 4 fighters who underestimated us. But we knew we would die there. Until you arrived, he whispered fondly. He listened to her words and was mesmerized by the sheer happiness and pride in her eyes. Even though we were Uchiha, no one bothered to protect the servants and prostitutes. You and the lazy fox were the only ones who came out to defend us. I remember being mesmerized watching your golden armor, your beautiful face, your quick sword dancing, and the brutal fox slaughter. It was a massacre, but for me it was one of the most beautiful things in the world, Mikoto explained fondly. He couldn't help but smile, for the pain in his heart had been forgotten, for at least he could give this girl something to be happy about, even if it was only his duty that demanded it. You were always kind and courteous to us servants, even though most looked down on you. My brother and I weren't much different, but when the battle was over, you walked towards us stained with blood and guts, saying the words that no one said to us after our parents died, he whispered. Are you okay? She repeated shyly, remembering the moment that made her smile too. Everyone always asked my brother and me to believe and follow many things, traditions, our superiors, our place in the world, our clan. But when I looked into your eyes for the first time, I knew I could believe in you. She smiled as he looked away in a pitiful effort to hide her moist eyes, so she hugged him tightly. I don't care what others think of you. I've never cared, and I never will, she promised, and she felt him tremble in her arms. Thank you, he whispered gratefully. They both remained embracing, knowing that although their hearts were together, their worlds were separate from each other. Makoto couldn't help laughing when he was the same as always. I wonder what Takashi's reaction will be if he finds out about our extra activities. It'll be pretty funny. He was relieved when she laughed even more while giving him a light tap on the arm, making him smile as well. "You're an idiot," she replied. "One of my best traits, aside from my skill with a sword," he boasted with an arrogant smile. "We're modest, aren't we?" she joked, and watched him shrug his shoulders shamelessly. "Don't worry. I'm older than Takashi," Makoto said confidently. "For 2 minutes." He smiled sarcastically as his nostrils dilated and his face turned red with embarrassment. Seeing her raise her fists, he did the only sensible thing. He ran. Midnight. As darkness blanketed the dense forests of Tierra del Fuego, a group of 6 Uchiha and a fox stood near the riverbank with frowns on their faces as they stared at their smiling leader. "Leave it there," Shursui said impatiently, tired of Naruto's suspense. "Since we can't travel by land, we travel by water," Naruto said dramatically, even going so far as to give a thumbs up, causing Itachi to sweat a drop. "What does it matter? They will still see us," Takashi muttered. Naruto sighed, muttering something along the lines of "no imagination," which made Makoto smile. However, he was very curious when Naruto raised his hand, and the fierce look he received from the lazy fox was quite fierce. He had always wondered about the beast's intelligence, and in this case, his senses warned him just in time when Naruto lifted 7 large bubbles of water with a single finger. With his other hand, he took out 7 identical large straws and threw them perfectly over the water bubbles. Kurama felt a chill run through his entire body as Naruto dropped his smile to replace it with a chilling look that made his surprised friends a little more upright and attentive. "We are ninjas. Stealth is our best weapon, and we will use it to the fullest unless we are forced to fight openly," Naruto said decisively. "The current is strong downstream, and we will need proper navigation to reach Yamenka territory, even if it is very closely connected to the Senju lands," Kagami warned. "And keep these bubbles together in an unbreakable link so that none of us are separated, because if that happens, we're lost," Shursui suggested. "But we don't doubt your control over the water, and this is the best way to get to our destination without attracting attention. It's risky, but doable," Itachi nodded with a firm nod. Makoto looked at the golden-armored brown Uchiha with concern. He had never doubted his strength or his determination, but his journey was going to be long, dangerous, and exhausting. Naruto would be solely responsible for keeping everyone alive, because even a small mistake of his would mean death for anyone or everyone. "And what about your chakra reserves? Will you be able to endure this journey without exhausting yourself?" "Because you won't have time to rest," Makoto said hesitantly, receiving a steely look from the golden-armored Uchiha. "Just follow my example, and I won't fail any of you, I promise." Despite the risks and challenges, both Kurama and the Uchiha couldn't help but at least respect Naruto's trust and determination. Whether he would succeed in making them a reality was a debatable question. But he was the leader of his squad, and he had given the order. Objection was not an option. 2 hours later, Shursui took a deep breath of fresh air as he finally emerged from the depths of the river, breaking free from the water bubble, and was soon joined by the rest of his companions who did the same when his group finally reached their destination. Their heavy armor and weapons were previously stored in sealed scrolls before they began their uncertain journey. He watched Naruto being the first to reach the shore and looked towards all of them with an arrogant smile. "Cheater," Makoto muttered, for their leader had not swum or walked to shore, but instead had the water of the river carry him into the lands in a small wave as if he were royalty, while the rest of the squad was forced to walk, swim, and, in the case of a grumpy fox, paddling to shore on all fours like a stupid dog, so he gave a nasty look to his companion, who just patted him on the head affectionately. When he reached the shore, Makoto couldn't help but witness the unique relationship that Naruto and the fox shared. The Uchiha always tried his best to irritate the fox, and the beast did the same. But always, in the end, both simply laughed or growled, as in the case of the fox. Despite her indifferent nature, She knew that the fox was a deadly beast capable of killing, as she had already helped Naruto slaughter the Fuma clan. She dreaded the day when these two would fight together again with all their might, because that day would be the true reckoning of the Uchiha clan's words. Fire and blood. But he also noticed that aside from taunting his friends by reaching the shore first, Naruto had already placed silencing seals on a newly established perimeter by himself along with a strong anti-detection genjutsu. Currently, the Uchiha leader was busy using a simple wind jutsu to dry his cunning friend, who finally stopped frowning. Shursui and Kagami did the same with the rest of the team. Without a word, they opened their storage scrolls and reassembled themselves. Now, clad in heavy armor and their weapons, they were ready to accomplish their mission. No one said a word, but there were a number of feelings lurking in his eyes. Fear, excitement, anxiety, doubt, acceptance, and determination. "Did you like the water ride?" asked Naruto with a jovial smile, instantly breaking the tension as everyone stared at him. "Next time I'll walk," Kagami protested with a snort. "Breathing through a straw for hours is very uncomfortable," complained Takashi with a slight glance at his leader. "Couldn't you have created a wind jutsu that would allow us to breathe in the water bubble?" asked Shursui in a friendly manner. Mikoto and Itachi simply shrugged their shoulders as the giant fox growled, signifying his annoyance at the trip. Kurama smiled sarcastically as he heard Naruto mutter something akin to "ungrateful bastard" in a sulky voice, prompting amused laughter from the group. The fox couldn't help but notice the subtle way the boy had eased the overflowing tension and anxiety of his group, even if it meant becoming the butt of jokes. It was one of the many prominent traits that differentiated the boy from his ancestor, Indra. But when everyone seemed relaxed and prepared, Kurama saw the same mortal eyes of Indra Uchiha coming alive on this boy again. "We can discuss the battle plan now that I've secured this area," Naruto suggested seriously, referring to the genjutsu and silencing seals that would give them much-needed cover. As he explained his strategy, most of his peers clearly expressed the flaws and merits, but still gave their consent by making him smile. When everyone understood their part in the plan, they all looked at Kurama, causing the beast to frown as he noticed that everyone except Naruto, Mikoto, and Itachi was watching him skeptically. The first two appreciated it, while the second was too intelligent to comprehend Kurama's hidden power, though he had never expressed it to anyone in his group or clan. "Do you think the fox can handle a proper distraction to alert an entire clan?" asked Takashi hesitantly, fearful of the beast as he growled menacingly at it. Naruto smiled, receiving a devilish smile from Kurama. "Oh, he's going to enjoy playing with the Mind Walkers," Naruto said cheerfully, making his group sweat a drop at the sight of the bloodthirsty smile that appeared in Kurama's eyes. It was as if they had taken off his leash and allowed him to do something that was his true nature: be wild and create chaos. "What's our plan to protect the fox if it gets into trouble?" asked Shursui worriedly, surprising Kurama suddenly. "We need one of us to stay behind and have an escape route ready in case we fail or the situation gets really tough. That person can also help the fox if the need arises," Mikoto suggested sincerely, and saw that the fox looked at her approvingly for her comment about her ability to handle Yamanaka. "Who?" asked Kagami seriously. Naruto saw again in the eyes of his friends the raw clarity. The one who stayed behind would have a good chance of being the first to die along with the fox, as the Yamanaka would begin to hunt them with all their might. And that meant death. The same was true of those who would carry out the other part of the plan. Naruto saw that Kurama was about to leave without any expectation that any Uchiha other than the Kinslayer would risk their lives for the beast, and that would have been the case until an Uchiha got up. Shursui Uchiha had always been Naruto's most loyal and obedient friend, someone who never disappointed, and that fact didn't change that night when the same boy approached Kurama, much to the surprise of the others. "Are you really going to risk your life for the fox if he gets into trouble, Shursui?" asked Takashi, frowning. His dislike for the fox was evident in his voice. "Yes." Naruto couldn't help but be filled with pride, because with a simple word, Shursui had reaffirmed his belief that there was still hope for his clan. He was a good warrior, but a better man than any of his group. There was no hesitation or doubt in his determined eyes as he stared at a shocked Kurama. "Come on, mate," Shursui said with a smile, earning an equally surprising friendly smile from the fox before they both walked away. "Honorable fool," Takashi muttered disappointedly, earning 2 punches from Kagami and Itachi. But Mikoto's gaze was fixed on Naruto's eyes, which were still fixed on Shursui Uchiha's figure as he moved away. And in the eyes of the Kinslayer, he saw something he had never seen before. Admiration. He couldn't help but feel that, out of the whole group, Naruto admired and respected Shursui the most. The boy was honorable, kind, brave, and loyal like the noble samurai of the stories everyone had heard as a child. Something she felt Naruto really wanted to be until her life changed forever. She watched him hide his feelings and take a deep breath. When he looked back at the rest of the group, he was once again the leader they needed at that moment. "Naruto Uchiha, you are a mysterious man." Shursui carefully hid among the tall trees as his piercing gaze stared intently at Kurama, who was walking nonchalantly on the ground. Just a few more steps and the fox would break through the barrier of sensors that the Yamanaka always used. No intruder could penetrate the clan's possessions without alerting their ever-on-call barrier teams. And yet, Naruto had relied on this beast to cause a worthy distraction that would allow 5 Uchiha to sneak into the chaos. Shursui had already determined 2 separate routes that his team could use to quickly escape in case of serious trouble, but he was hopeful that Naruto could pull it off. Because if he managed to do what he planned, he would greatly improve his tarnished reputation in his clan and make his enemies fear him and his allies respect him. Shursui, like the rest of the Kin Guard, had always wondered why Naruto had murdered his own people. Everyone harbored doubts and dislike for the boy, but he himself continued to fight, proving his loyalty over and over again despite the hatred and contempt that everyone instilled in him. The opinion of the members of the Kinsman Guard changed the day Naruto, along with the fox, set out to meet the enemy Fuma clan. He risked his life to protect the servants and prostitutes, whom no one bothered to defend, as most of the Uchiha guards decided to wait inside the great castle, protecting the heirs of important families and respected dignitaries, while the Fuma clan set fire to corridors and barracks. His actions that day revealed a side of him that none of them believed existed. And when they took the risk of meeting him, they were surprised to discover that the boy was nothing like the rumors that announced him. And for that Shursui was eternally grateful. His eyes widened in horror and amazement at the same time as the fox broke through the barrier and unleashed such a massive explosion of chakra that it sent Shursui away from his safe location. With a growl, he landed the ground and couldn't help but gasp as the demonic chakra assaulted his senses. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear and his own death in front of his eyes as he watched the fox look hatefully with his demonic eyes at the settlement of Yamanaka. The large amount of energy that the beast had just released erased any doubts from Shursui's mind. This was no ordinary animal. Possibly it was a powerful invocation or something much worse. The amount of chakra the fox had released caused the barrier to collapse from the impact, and soon alarms sounded throughout the Yamanaka settlement as the Mind Walkers prepared for a full-blown enemy assault. Shursui could already feel the first responders charging towards his location to eliminate the threat. However, despite his fears and distrust of the fox, he got up and stood next to the beast, ready for battle. Kurama raised an eyebrow in amusement at the fear in Shursui's eyes and couldn't blame the boy, for the amount of energy he had just released exceeded that possessed by 1,000 veteran ninjas. And that was just a hint of his true power. Even so, he had to give credit to the young Uchiha for when most of them would have fled the place. Shursui was controlling his fears as he unleashed his sword because his enemies were almost upon them now. Kurama decided to have a little more fun as he untied his 9 tails and grew even larger in size, much to Shursui's horror, which only grew when the fox gave him a menacing smile. "If you die, I'll eat you." Shursui paled in sheer shock at hearing the fox speak in a human tongue. But after a while he smiled sarcastically, which earned the huge beast a smile. With a silent battle cry, the Uchiha and Biju attacked the early defenders of Yamanaka. Naruto watched Yamanaka's defenders rush out of their massive clan castle by the hundreds as their civilian subjects screamed in terror throughout the city, outside the castle. He placed his hand on the ground and nodded silently as he felt the pieces fall into place. With a flick of his wrist, he gestured for Itachi to move, which the Uchiha boy did without hesitation and began to run silently towards the city full of civilians while the rest of the squad gathered behind him. "What happens now?" Mikoto asked hesitantly, seeing the cold look in Naruto's eyes. "They will surrender or I will destroy them," he promised without remorse. He turned to his last 3 squad mates who were still with him. Mikoto looked shocked, having never seen a conflict of this magnitude. Takashi seemed ready to shed blood, while Kagami hid his emotions behind a stoic expression. "At this rate, dozens will die," Mikoto warned. "Hundreds," Naruto replied coldly. She nodded weakly because despite the harsh order it was her duty to follow his orders, and at least there was no doubt in her eyes regarding his plan that gave everyone some hope. "Mikoto, the Yamanaka are holding Kiera Hitaki in the castle's 3rd tower. You will rescue her without fail," Naruto ordered. "What about the guards running outside the castle?" asked Takashi seriously. "When most of them are outside, we will infiltrate the castle and head to their command and communication center. There I will end this conflict or destroy this clan forever," Naruto said firmly. "Understood," Mikoto replied, performing a quick shunshin and walking away to carry out his mission. Naruto unleashed his sword while Kagami and Takashi dutifully stood by his side to fulfill his mission. "We will take this city tonight." 3 shadows crossed the vast corridors of Yamanaka Castle, hidden in the shadows. Their former clan affiliations were hidden by the Yamanaka guard uniforms they had borrowed from Easy Guards. Most of the castle's security forces had already moved towards the borders where the real action was taking place. Naruto couldn't help but smile, as he knew that Kurama must be having fun after so long. The beast was forced to keep a low profile for years, and only with the Fuma clan incident did he have a chance to vent. Despite his friendly nature, Kurama was a beast of destruction and death. Naruto had never forgotten that fact, and Yamanaka wouldn't either after that day. He was still hesitant to expose even a little of Kurama's true power, knowing that the Hagoromo and Kagaya clans were pursuing him for reasons the beast was still unaware of. Not to mention, the Uchiha, Senju, or any other clan would not allow such a powerful beast to walk free without contributing to their cause. However, Kurama had found a place for himself among the Uchiha due to his help in the massacre of the Fuma clan. The Uchiha clan was also not as weak as it was 8 years ago, as they had many more sworn allies to their cause and were able to deal with any threat posed by the Kagaya or Hagoromo clans against the beast. With that thought in mind, Naruto signaled to his 2 comrades when they saw 2 guards guarding the nearest stairwell leading to the command and communication center where the barrier teams and clan leadership would be fighting to establish order. Takashi and Kagami expertly hit the 2 guards in the neck with sleeping darts, allowing Naruto to charge forward and quickly grab the 2 Yamanaka, now unconscious, and hide their bodies in a nearby room. He motioned for his comrades to stop while he sensed any other presence on the upper stairs, and when he found none except a few strong ones at the top, he motioned for them to follow. They climbed the stairs as fast as they could, knowing that this speed would lead them to life or death. They finally arrived at the command center and saw 20 Yamanaka waiting for them with weapons raised. "I guess it was too much to expect a smooth acquisition," Naruto said with a smile. When he saw some Yamanaka raise their hands to perform his clan's famous jutsu, he quickly grabbed smoked bombs, as did Kagami and Takashi from their bags, and covered the corridor with thick smoke. Naruto activated his Sharingan and face mask, ready to protect himself from the smoke. Locating the chakra signatures of each of his enemies, he charged forward. The first 3 guards died before they could understand who had beaten them. He could feel Kagami and Takashi facing their own enemies as the smoke began to clear thanks to a quick wind jutsu from one of the Yamanaka. When his visions cleared, Naruto found himself surrounded by at least 10 Yamanaka while his friends fought the remaining 7 guards. He smiled sarcastically as they all attacked him at once with drawn swords, trying to dismember him. He raised his ancestral weapon, blocking the enemy weapons, and then, to his horror, the Uchiha disappeared into a flock of crows. Genjutsu. Naruto didn't laugh or mock as was usual for him, and only used that small advantage to cut off half of his enemies by cutting off their heads with a single quick blow. Su Sharingan spun again, predicting the movements of the remaining enemies as each of them tried to hit him from different angles. He made a quick jump, evading all cuts, and unleashed 5 fast and sharp kunai from his bag, 2 of them ending up in the skulls of Yamanaka's guards while the rest were sharply deflected. Yamanaka's last 3 guards cursed him loudly, but their eyes were fixed on his friends. Kagami gave a strong and merciless kick to one of his enemies, causing the man to cough up blood before Takashi's sword instantly decapitated him. When 2 guards attempted to attack Takashi from behind, Kagami advanced to defend him by blocking the sword with his armed gauntlets, much to the surprise of the Yamanaka. While the Yamanaka were greatly feared for their mental jutsu and interrogation and torture skills, they were no match in mortal physical combat, a trait in which the Uchiha and Senju excelled. Kagami pushed his opponents back with a strong push and quickly crouched down just in time as Takashi turned and slit the throats of the frightened enemies. The 2 remaining enemies retreated tremblingly as the 2 Uchiha boys approached them. But they were prevented from continuing to fight when Naruto appeared behind the 2 Yamanaka, stabbing one in the heart and the other in the temple with his kunai. Looking back, they saw that all of the Yamanaka guards fighting Naruto were dead with gruesome injuries. Naruto threw away his Yamanaka-stained uniform, causing Kagami and Takashi to do the same. Now dressed in his golden armor with the insignia of a dragon, he walked towards the door and gestured to his friends, who quickly nodded before placing explosive notes on the door. With a thunderous explosion, the locked door that was the last defense of the Yamanaka leadership was destroyed, and 3 Uchiha burst inside to find a dozen Yamanaka gawking at them in shock. Naruto's gaze focused on one Yamanaka in particular, taller and more majestic looking than the others. As if that were not enough, his priceless family armor and cold gaze revealed his position. Itama Yamanaka, the current clan chief and leader of his clan, stared at the 3 Uchiha in front of him, all armed and stained with blood. The blood of his people. He narrowed his gaze at the sight of the leader, wearing a mask and dazzling golden armor that bore a dragon insignia on his chest and a dark black cloak fluttering on his back. And that sword? There was no mistake. Murderer of relatives. Kagami and Takashi were about to move in retaliation for the insult until they received a discreet gaze from Naruto, who ordered them otherwise, who then looked at the Yamanaka clan leader with his own icy expression. "Senor Itama," he greeted coldly. "Why have you attacked my clan without any provocation on our part?" Itama asked accusingly, causing his few guards to tense and wave their weapons, though that did not attract a single eyelash from any of the Uchiha. "In retaliation for the crimes your nephew, Iwashi Yamanaka, committed against the Hitaki clan by kidnapping his heiress. Since they are now our sworn allies, it is our duty to do them justice," Naruto replied sincerely. Itama's eyebrows shot to his forehead at this revelation, unable to believe that the Hitaki, who were sworn allies of the Senju, could so easily switch sides with the Uchiha. But once again Hashirama had shown quite a bit of favoritism towards the Yamanaka clan at Tobarama's insistence, which led to this mess. Itama Yamanaka knew that the troubles had begun the day his nephew saw the young Hitaki when his clan visited Tsukumo for a meeting. Itama deeply loved his older brother, who passed away a few years ago, and his wife even earlier, leaving his only son, Iwashi, in the care of his uncle. He had tried to take care of the child and preserve his right as heir to the clan until he became strong enough. But Iwashi proved to be a disappointment and was nothing like his obedient parents, who gave their lives for their clan. The guy was only interested in women and alcohol, habits that led to all this bloodshed. Even so, it didn't change the fact that it was the Yamanaka who were attacked that night, and Itama had a duty to protect his people no matter who the enemy was. "Is that what you say to yourself? That you are a servant of justice? You who killed your own people?" sneered Itama, and smiled smugly as Naruto clenched the sword tighter, but his face showed no aggression at the insult. At the very least, Itama could see that the Kingslayer had absolute control over his emotions. But, if possible, his fiery Sharingan eyes burned with even more hatred and malice. Your nephew is a fool, Mr. Itama. He may be the rightful heir, but a person who brought great suffering to his noble clan. You will only bring ruin to your people, but you are the legitimate leader that your people need right now and in the future, Naruto said calmly. What are you saying? Asked one of Yamanaka's guards suspiciously. Condemn your nephew to the justice that Tsukumo Hatake deems just for his crimes, along with all those who participated in it. You must also pay reparations to the Uchiha clan for having dared to harm one of our allies, and from today on, you and your clan will serve mine until the end of time. Kagami and Takashi stiffened upon hearing Naruto's demands, and judging by the growing red on the Yamanaka faces, they could see that these people were about to explode because unlike the Hatake, the Yamanaka, no matter how weak they were in actual combat, were an ancient and noble clan with great power. How dare you? Itama growled furiously, causing her guards to step forward. If possible, Naruto's cold smile became even more menacing as he pointed to the large barrier in the middle of the room that marked the location of each and every fighter along with their affiliations. And in a matter of seconds, the situation and the figures changed drastically. Where there were once nearly 1,000 Yamanaka fighting two great chakra signatures which were Shursui and Kurama, there were now almost 300 more chakra signatures, all bearing the marks of the Hatake clan, followed by hundreds more from the Uchiha clan, courtesy of Naori doing her part in the plan. The Yamanaka clan was surrounded. If that wasn't enough to make Itama and her followers lose the color on their faces, the following news was the final nail in the coffin. Mr. Itama, our own civilians are attacking our own guards. They all seem to be wearing some kind of jinjutsu, one of the ninjas on the barrier team shouted. Takashi and Kagami looked at each other and knew who was responsible for this strange action. Itachi. Or you can choose to challenge us and face the consequences. You already know our quantity, our power, the fact that we have you surrounded and cornered. If I give the order, my forces will tear down the walls of your city and storm this castle, Naruto promised coldly. Itama took a step back when the Kinslayer unleashed all its killing intent, causing most of the Yamanaka to fall to their knees and look away from those Sharingan assassins who promised to give them painful deaths. Hundreds will die, most of them yours. The first wave will be your own civilians, controlled by one of my men. So you'll start this bloody battle by killing those who have served your clan for generations. The second wave will be the Hatake, who crave revenge. My Uchiha warriors will follow you when most of your warriors are dead, wounded, or tired. When this castle falls, everyone inside will be executed, including your entire family. Your people will be slaughtered, your towers will burn. I will destroy this castle stone by stone, and by the time I finish, no one will ever know of the existence of the Yamanaka clan, Naruto promised in a grim tone. He walked forward and grabbed the shocked Yamanaka clan leader by the neck, clearly looking the now terrified man in the eye. I'll cut off your limbs painfully and make your pregnant wife see it. Then, before I kill you and her, I will tear her belly, showing you both the face of her unborn child before I kill him as well. Naruto let go of the man's neck, making him fall to his knees, now trembling, as the Uchiha in front of him had made him see the vision with the help of his Sharingan. Everything he had said, he was going to do, including killing Itama's unborn child in front of him, along with his wife. The trembling man looked at the Kingslayer, remembering that this monster hadn't even spared its own people, slaughtering innocent men, women, and children. And those were his own people. Mr. Itama, I'll leave you to make your decision, Naruto said coldly. Without saying another word, he turned and marched towards the destroyed exit, followed by his companions. The Yamanaka were about to breathe a sigh of relief, as the devastating killer instinct began to fade until it returned in full force when Naruto stopped at the edge of the destroyed door, staring back at Itama Yamanaka with his cold Sharingan. I hope you remember the words of my clan, Itama Yamanaka. And then he walked away even as the famous words of the Uchiha sent a chill down the hearts of the Yamanaka. The royal guard watched with great pride as the finely crafted dragon banner along with the symbol of the Uchiha clan now floated side by side, next to the Yamanaka flag on top of the castle. The fight was over. Nearly 43 Yamanaka had to perish in battle for this feat to happen, but now the Uchiha had managed to win the loyalty of two great clans, thus further increasing their power and reputation among the elemental nations. Naori Uchiha had arrived along with Tsukumo Hitaki, bringing with her the strength of the entire Hitaki clan and nearly 300 Uchiha fighters who proved to be enough of a threat to make the Yamanaka surrender. Loud cheers could be heard throughout the town square as both the Uchiha and Hitaki praised the kinsman guard who led the assault and also rescued Kiera Hitaki. Above all, there were many among the Uchiha who praised Naruto, who stood next to his friends with his surprised expression hidden behind his mask. The young dragon. Naori couldn't help but smile when some of her clan members praised her nephew by the name they had given him years ago, ignoring the vulgar name they had smeared him with. And although those Uchiha were very few among all their fighters, it was a start. Because Naruto Uchiha had once again proven his worth, and this time his victory was no small thing. I asked him to do this discreetly, without alerting anyone, especially the Senjus, of our involvement in rescuing my daughter. He broke our agreement, hissed Tsukumo silently, earning a withering glance from Naori. Do you think we were going to take all this risk just to save your daughter? Lord Hitaki, you conveniently want to serve the Senju while receiving the help of the Uchiha whenever your masters deny you justice. That will not be tolerated, Naori warned, her menacing gaze fixed on Tsukumo Hitaki's heart. Where is my daughter? Tsukumo asked worriedly, and saw Naori smile maliciously. He is safe with us in our fortress. We will return it to you once we sign the official treaty of alliance with you and the Yamanakas, Naori said sweetly, and couldn't help but smile as Tsukumo turned pale. You can't do this, replied Tsukumo angrily, his hand craving his sword. I have already done so, Lord Hitaki. You are working for us now, and you had better join us as soon as possible, for the Senjus have called their allies, and you will not like what they do to you if they defeat us. Tsukumo blanched as he realized the consequences of his actions. He expected Naruto to act discreetly without involving the Hitakis, but all this time he had assumed that it was Naruto who made the decisions. But it was always her. Naori knew that the Hitaki could not afford to ally with the Uchiha, nor could the Yamanaka because their territories were right next to Senju's borders. Hashirama Senju would never allow the Uchiha to have influence right outside his door. Naori had reluctantly forced Tsukumo to lead his troops into battle along with the Uchiha as a precautionary measure to protect his daughter in case Naruto failed. His reasoning seemed right at the time, and he had agreed, for he loved his daughter too much. Now, that same love had involved him. The Senjus would never forgive him for this, even if he betrayed the Uchiha. He looked at Naori and couldn't help but imagine that someone so beautiful could be capable of such cunning. This woman also used her daughter as a bargaining chip to make sure she didn't go overboard, while Naruto had somehow intimidated the Yamanaka so much that they had given up right away. You're good at this game, Tsukumo finally said with a resigned smile. I always play to win, Mr. Tsukumo. It is true that I made him believe that my nephew possesses all the power, and to some extent he does. I allowed him to draw up his battle plan because I see great potential in him. At the same time, I had to make sure that the Uchiha clan got something meaningful out of this confrontation. Not all battles are fought with the sword, Naori explained sincerely. You are a dangerous woman, Tsukumo reluctantly admitted, making her smile. That's what I am. Naori found her beloved nephew at the top of the castle she had conquered 2 weeks earlier. He saw him gazing at the vast forests surrounding Yamanaka territory, as well as the small celebrations his own clans held with the Hitaki in the village. She stood next to him and couldn't help but look at his face that seemed deeply lost in thought. I kept my promise. Naori smiled at him and took his hand in hers, giving him a gentle squeeze. Thank you, she whispered gratefully, knowing that it was her turn to fulfill the promise she had made to her. What was my mother like? He looked into her eyes, and all she could see was a curious child, and not the man who could make his enemies shrink with just his gaze. I'm sure many have told you over the years that you look like her, Naori reminded him, nodding in confirmation. Madara, Inabi, and Yashiro resembled their father in appearance and character. But you and Izuna were Hikari's truest children. She loved her family more than anything. Her children meant everything to her, and for them, she was willing to do anything, even if it meant giving her life or taking the lives of others, Naori explained patiently and watched him reflect on his words. As the wind gently stirred her silky hair, she let out a sigh of desire. I wonder what he would think of me now after all the things I've done, he suggested. She would love you just the same, even if she never knew why you did what you had to do. Mothers are like that, Naori promised. Like you? He asked, amused, making her smile. Yes. They both fell silent after that and watched the celebrations unfold throughout the village. Her only consolation was her soft, clasped hands. Will you be there for the trial of Awashi Yamanaka? Asked Naori earnestly. I doubt anyone wants to see the Kingslayer involved in matters of justice. It would be a cruel joke, he replied sarcastically, making her frown hard. That's not true, and you'll be there for me, Naori ordered with a mocking smile, which caused her to laugh. The things I do for my loved ones, Naruto said, amused. Does that include someone named Mikoto? Naruto paled a little as his piercing eyes looked at him knowingly. This woman? I haven't told anyone. I will never tell you. Promised. I don't love her, Naruto clarified sincerely, but he couldn't understand why those treacherous words escaped his lips. Naori didn't reprimand him or glare accusingly at him for his decision. He simply put a hand on his covered cheek. Why don't you do it? Of all the things I could have asked of her, this was probably the strangest. However, it also made him reflect on why he felt nothing but a curious attraction to Mikoto. The girl was beautiful, skillful, and caring. More than someone like him ever deserved. Everything was perfect, but it wasn't at the same time. A strange paradox, something common in his twisted life, that made him laugh. But, contrary to popular belief, he respected women. He had kept his promise to his father not to have sex with prostitutes or any woman. Even with Mikoto, he had never gone beyond simple kisses. Because he knew his limits and knew that if anyone ever discovered it, it would not be him who would suffer, but she. And he would never allow that, let alone someone he really cared about. He couldn't help laughing at himself, because hours ago he had threatened to wipe out an entire clan, including innocents, and yet his heart was fiercely protective of a girl's fate. You're a wild dragon, Naori scolded with a playful wink. I'll take it as a compliment, he replied brazenly, earning himself a blow to the head in return. I received news from your father, and he is very pleased with your achievement. He is proud of your loyalty to the clan, Naori praised. Is that all? He shuddered at the sound of her cold voice and those accusing eyes that burned with so much hatred. What made her worse was knowing that he was right to harbor those feelings. He could clearly see the resentment lurking in Naruto's eyes, for Taijima had never written him a personal letter, only congratulating him on his victories and reminding him not to break the laws anymore. While Madara always wrote to her brother, Taijima had never written to, and she could see that it had hurt the boy in front of her. Naori herself was ashamed of her brother, hoping that, after all that had happened to her own son, Taijima would show him more appreciation and affection. But, of course, Taijima only cared about the surname Uchiha above all else. Madara never cared if his father gave him love or attention, but Naruto was a different story. A story made even more complicated by the dark history that father and son share. The one that only Naori and Madara knew. She was still amazed by Naruto's loyalty despite everything that had happened to him. He had never broken his vows or promises to the clan, fighting even for those who despised him. You are an honorable man, she said sadly, but he shook his head furiously. Honor? I'm a dog, my father's mad dog, Naruto replied fiercely as his Sharingan came to life. Naruto. All of his anger, pain, and hatred came alive in his dark red eyes as he glared at her furiously. The only reason I allow all these to make fun of me, judge me, and hate me is for one simple fact. Everything I've done so far and in the future isn't for my father or our clan. It's because of my brothers, Naruto shouted. He trembled before her eyes. All the pain and frustration he endured each day was clearly visible in those immensely angry eyes. She had no words that could comfort him or make his pain go away, so she hugged him and felt him relax a little. I will fight for Madara as long as I can, enduring as much as I can until my end comes. Promised. Before she could comfort him, he broke the embrace and quickly disappeared with a quick shunshin. Shursui had been wandering through the forests around Yamanaka territory in hopes of better understanding the terrain in case of a future attack by the Senjus. However, his mission was cut short when he heard a distinctive sound. As he walked to the riverbank, he came across a strange sight. He watched a dozen armed warriors fighting a single man with everything they had, whether it was jutsu or weapons. The funny thing was that they all looked like the enemy they were fighting. Shursui watched Naruto attack and defend himself from his army of shadow and water clones. The sheer number of clones used was a testament to the Kingslayer's gigantic chakra reserves. But Shursui did not fail to notice a clear difference. He had fought alongside these guys for years and knew that he fought with finesse rather than brute force, unless the situation demanded it. But right now, the same warrior whipped his clones mercilessly, as if venting all his anger on the poor aftershocks, whose only option to survive was to fight him together, and even then, they died brutally. Shursui grimaced as Naruto launched a huge blast of lightning from his body that electrocuted most of his clones while they were all fighting quite close to the river. He watched the Kingslayer cover his body with dark blue lightning armor. And he thanked the gods for making the Yamanaka surrender, while before his eyes this boy slaughtered the remaining clone forces in 5 seconds. Even now I can get through all 5 of them. Shursui remembered Naruto's words to the Kindred Guard, and seeing him fight like this was a testament to that statement. There was a reason why no Uchiha had dared to lift a finger at Naruto despite their hatred for him, other than the fact that he was the son of the clan chief and the younger brother of Madara Uchiha. Naruto was a deadly fighter. Someone Shursui respected immensely. "You look angry," he remarked, causing the panting boy to look at him. "I'm always angry, Shursui," Naruto admitted with a fake smile, one that Shursui chose to ignore as he approached his friend. "Do you want to fight?" Naruto challenged excitedly. Shursui looked at his friend and saw that he had barely finished venting his anger. Without a word, he drew his sword, earning a nod from his friend, who raised his. They both disappeared and found themselves in the middle of the river, while their swords clashed violently. Shursui was strengthened by feeling Naruto pushing him with brutal force. If it was an all-out battle, then his decision to fight in a body of water would have been suicidal against his current opponent. But today Naruto wanted to prove himself with his sword, so Shursui let himself be pushed back before suddenly losing control of his sword. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, as Shursui's sudden surrender had caused his own sword to be about to pierce the boy's neck. Instantly, he reacted defensively to prevent his friend from suffering any harm. And then he saw Shursui smile. In the blink of an eye, Shursui forced himself to grab his falling sword, and even as Naruto moved to counter the sudden movement, he already felt the other boy's gun pointed directly at his heart. "Produce," Naruto growled, but stopped when Shursui drew blood by gently hitting Naruto's heart with his sword. "Control your emotions." Naruto clenched his gun tightly as he stared at his friend, who was staring at him firmly. With a furious growl, he stepped back and lowered the sword, forcing Shursui to do the same. "No matter what, never lose your cool, Naruto. You're better than all of us fighting, but it won't matter if you lose your temper. It may give you power, but in the end you will be defeated," Shursui warned. Despite the scolding, Shursui was glad to see his friend nod, albeit a little reluctantly. "What's going on? It's been a long time since I've seen you so upset," Shursui asked cautiously. He waited while Naruto took a few deep breaths to clear his uncontrolled emotions before looking thoughtfully at the calm river that flowed beneath them. "Yesterday, I threatened to murder an entire clan and even kill an unborn child in front of its parents, and my father says he is proud of my actions," Naruto lamented, guilt visible on his embarrassed face. Shursui wished that the people who called this boy a traitor and scum could see him right now, because then they would realize their mistake in judging this boy. We did what we had to win, Shursui said honestly, but Naruto shook his head. What if they hadn't given up? Does that mean I have to kill them all? By the actions of a single man? Asked Naruto disappointedly. That's the way this world is, my friend, Shursui confessed. Then it's fucked. Shursui didn't blame his friend for shouting like that, because if the Yamanaka hadn't surrendered, Naruto would have been forced to slaughter the entire clan down to the last fetus. Even in the case of the Fuma clan, which his friend killed in combat a few years ago, he was forced to do so, as the Fuma did not surrender. If they had, Shursui had a feeling that at least Naruto wouldn't have killed them all. Because he was not ruthless like Taijima or indifferent like Madara. Naruto felt things differently and much more deeply than his family. Shursui had always been clear about it. Then why don't you do something about it? The brown-haired man blinked at his friend's words. Didn't he know the situation Naruto was in? Despite this, Shursui looked at him with an unfriendly face. What? Naruto asked foolishly. If you feel something is wrong, correct it. You're luckier than most in that regard. Shursui said patiently, not blinking for a second as Naruto stared at him harshly. Don't you know who I am? Naruto asked bitterly, but he shuddered when Shursui gave him a hard look. You are the son of Taijima Uchiha, heir to the world's greatest clan, the greatest swordsman of the elemental nations, and the bearer of the legendary Sharingan. In my opinion, you are one of the most powerful people in the world, Shursui admitted. Before Naruto could protest, the other boy raised his hand, firmly silencing any protests. Unfortunately, that didn't stop his friend. If I were strong, my brothers wouldn't be dead. If it were powerful, then there would be no. Naruto whispered solemnly. He paused when a steady hand came to rest on his shoulders, and he saw Shursui's smiling face staring at him. I know. Shursui was not surprised when Naruto turned pale, for in those words was hidden the biggest secret of his life, the one that almost destroyed him, but also made him the warrior he was today. How? Stammered Naruto in disbelief. I saw it from the shadows. Kagami and Itachi too. We choose to serve under you knowing exactly what kind of person you are. A true ninja is not the most powerful or the strongest, but the one who protects from the shadows. The one who bears the burden while living in darkness so that others may see the light. And for that you don't need jutsu or strength, but a pure and dedicated heart. You have that heart, and I want you to use it to achieve everything you desire. Shursui suggested sincerely, causing Naruto to look away. I just want this senseless fight to end. I may never have a family of my own, but my brother will someday. And I don't want them to see or do what we've done, Naruto confessed, earning a nod from his compassionate friend. There can never be two swords for the same scabbard, Naruto. The Uchiha and Senju are those swords. Until we are at war, there will never be peace in the land of fire. Unless we achieve peace between us first, no other clan or daimyo will even think about it, because they all fear us and also desire the benefits we bestowed upon them through our endless conflict. You've seen this fact with the Yamanaka and Hatake clans, Shursui explained candidly. Naruto pondered those words and their profound implications. It was one thing to protect his clan, but killing people senselessly over and over again for his entire life wasn't something he wanted to do. And just as Shursui said, the Uchiha and the Senju were simply two extremely powerful families. The remaining clans respected and feared these factions, but at the same time, neither of the two great clans had the power to control the entire land of fire for long. As long as the Uchiha had Madara and the Senju had Hashirama, neither family would lose. What do you want with your life, Shursui? Naruto asked curiously, prompting a laugh from the other Uchiha as he struck his own sword. I just want to do the right thing, Shursui confessed. And what is that? Asked Naruto, earning a knowing look from the boy. I've already done it. With those cryptic words, Shursui walked away, leaving behind a confused but much calmer Naruto, who finally smiled slightly. Naruto remained stoic throughout the trial of Awashi Yamanaka. He stood guard alongside his aunt and watched as she and Lord Tsukumo Hatake interrogated the culprit, the cause of all this violence and loss of life. In fact, he was quite surprised when the young man quickly confessed his guilt and tried to shield himself, claiming that it was an impulsive act that should not have happened. In fact, he had the nerve to ask for mercy. Even Lord Itama Yamanaka, the current head of the clan, offered a large number of rewards and fertile land in exchange for sparing his nephew's life. Naturally, Uchiha Naori was in favor of that option because it would ensure a respectable peace between the two clans. All eyes were directed to Tsukumo Hatake, who was looking sadly at the wooden table below. Naruto himself couldn't help but stare at this man and wonder what decision he would make. Then, surprisingly, Tsukumo looked at him, and the unasked question was present in his eyes. Naruto looked at Iwashi Yamanaka, and despite his terrified expression, he saw the almost victorious look that was hidden in the boy's cunning eyes. He knew that he had made a powerful offer for his life, including a strategic master move that forced Tsukumo to choose peace over future conflict. But 43 lives were lost because of this man's stupid and selfish act. So many men and women who would never see their family or friends again. Tsukumo stared into the kinslayer's hard eyes that gave a single suggestion. Justice. Iwashi Yamanaka. All of the Uchiha, Hatake, and Yamanaka within the courtroom listened intently as Lord Tsukumo stood up from his chair and looked at the young man who was about to smile with relief and victory. For your crimes that caused a bloody conflict between our clans and the loss of so many lives on both sides, I condemn you to death. There were gasps of amazement and even some outrageous protests throughout the room. Even Naori seemed horrified at the Hatake leader's extreme decision, despite all the compensation she had been offered. Then he saw his nephew move and knew what was about to happen. Iwashi shouted obscenities and protests at the top of his lungs, but no one from his clan or any other faction rose in his support. When the members of the Kindred Guard held him tightly and forced him to his knees, he began to tremble. His eyes widened in fear as he saw the kinship killer walk in front of him with a cold look in his eyes. Any last words? Naruto asked coldly. You, parent hunter. Naruto gave a cold smile to the blonde Yamanaka. You're not my type. With a single sword strike, the golden head of Yamanaka's heir was separated from his body, causing a stunned silence in the courtroom. Naruto wiped the blood from his sword as his friends dragged the decapitated body, even taking the severed head with them. When he finished, he looked at the two clan chiefs. Tsukumo's face reflected resignation and weariness, while Itama Yamanaka looked dejected, but his eyes were devoid of hatred, for he knew that his nephew deserved his fate. The fact that an Uchiha killed him eliminated any chance of revenge for any impulsive Yamanaka, for no one dared to challenge the dragon. It's done, Naruto declared coldly, daring anyone to say otherwise. None did. Before any clan chiefs or Naori could say anything, the door to the courtroom opened once more as a terrified messenger burst inside and said only one word that conveyed his fear to most of the others present in the room. Sanjus. Not a second later, alarms sounded throughout the city announcing the arrival of the dreaded enemy. But as chaos and confusion threatened to erupt in the three clans, an imposing presence spread throughout the hall. His killer instinct ran so deep that it threatened to make many laugh their asses. They all looked at the source of this power and saw the kin killer looking at them with a confident smile. Come with me and burn some tree huggers, Naruto roared, unleashing his ancestral sword. When one of the Uchiha stood up, the famous madness and bloodlust of his clan was reflected in their eyes as they celebrated the decision. Behind them, the Hatakes also roared in approval as their leader nodded. Finally, Itama Yamanaka nodded in resignation, prompting Yamanaka's ninjas to get up abruptly and nod their heads half-heartedly. Throwing one last glance towards his aunt, who also gave him a firm nod. Naruto Uchiha marched into battle. Armed warriors ran through the city with determination and anxiety in their eyes. Chaos spread around every corner as the drums of war and alarm bells rang louder and louder with each passing second. Screams of terror swept through the lands as frightened civilians were directed towards the shelters within the castle fort. A large army of fighters gathered behind him, ready to fight and die on a single command. He couldn't tell if his people felt the same way he did, but in the eyes of many he saw the same look he had in his own eyes. Madness. The hunger for battle, the desire to fight, the determination to be victorious, with victory or death. The sweet sound of steel crashing against steel, of the agonizing screams of men and women, of blood and viscera flying around them, of fear in the eyes of their enemies as they struck the final blow. Naruto looked at his ancestral sword, Dawn, with its finely crafted blade and hilt bearing the seal of a dragon. Fire and blood. There was power in those ancient words. An immeasurable force that made his kind brim with pride and confidence. Many called it arrogance, and he had never denied it, for his species deserved that fear and that respect. It was that same fear that caused Hitaki and Yamanaka's to join their forces waiting for their order. He could feel her blood pumping, her heart threatening to burst with joy, intoxication threatening to flood her senses as she experienced the sensation of the sweetest thing in the world about to touch her lips. Battle. Nothing was more terrifying or more glorious. He was never one to openly seek him, but there was a family with whom he actively sought him. Senju. He could still see his brothers dying before his eyes. The sharp kunai that struck Inabi in the neck as he choked on his own blood, and Yashiro desperately struggling in pain before exploding, taking more Senjus with him. Of that sword piercing Izuna's chest, and the feeling of seeing his beloved brother die in his arms. He trembled with hatred and vengeance that burned him deeply. He must have looked quite terrifying with his Sharingan, for none of his men dared to mock him or ask him questions. They did not dare to speak, for their murderous instinct threatened to slaughter them if they crossed the line. Her family guard was all around her, proud and silent. He could feel the darkest parts of his soul transforming into reality, as he had only experienced such feelings the day he killed his own relative, earning the name Kinslayer. Even Kurama kept his distance and wasn't going to participate in the battle, knowing how personal he was to Naruto. The boy knew that the fox was capable of ending the fight on his own, but that would not sit well with his friend, who had been longing for this opportunity for a long time. Furthermore, if the beast fought the Senjus, it would only attract more attention, which was not what Naruto wanted at the time. At that moment, Kurama saw every ounce of Indra coming to life in the boy as he stared at the massive defensive force of over 1,000 men. Any of you who try to flee, shrink, or die without killing 3 Senjus, Naruto warned, deploying his killing intent, completely causing dozens of his troops to fall to their knees. The madness was reflected in his eyes when he made his promise. I will burn them and their families alive. He smiled wickedly as he saw them nod in fear and quickly turned around, his kindred guard lining up. Together, the 6, dressed in battle armor and with dark cloaks fluttering behind them, marched forward with the allied army at their backs. Their shining swords craved the taste of Senju blood. Members of the kindred guard watched their leader intently as their large army took up positions and many hid from the eyes of the approaching enemy. Are the traps in place? Asked Naruto coldly, without any emotion in his voice except hatred. It's done, Mr. Commander, Itachi replied in the affirmative. Each of you took command of different units on our flanks. I will keep the center, Naruto ordered stoically. Naruto, a massive force of Senjus, Sarutobi, Inuzuka, and Akimichi are approaching us. Our sensors and barrier equipment placed their numbers twice as much as ours, Kagami warned, and shuddered when he saw the merciless smile on his friend's face. More bastards to kill. Each member of the kindred guard looked at the dangerous behavior of their leader and friend with uncertainty. They knew that Naruto was a calm and capable battle commander who used to prefer tactics to brute force. But today he did the opposite. To be more precise, his hatred of the Senjus overwhelmed every other feeling in his heart. Is Tobirama Senju leading them? Shursui shuddered as he felt the bloodlust in his friend's voice. They had heard about Madara's obsessive rivalry with Hashirama Senju, and in that aspect Naruto was not much different from his older brother, as he had an unhealthy hatred for Tobirama Senju. Answer me. Everyone shuddered except Itachi at his brutal, authoritative voice, and only when Shursui nodded in confirmation, the monstrous killing intent moved away from them. "Any last orders?" asked Takashi obediently, which contrasted sharply with his rebellious nature. But even an impulsive one like him could see that Naruto wasn't going to tolerate mistakes or jokes this time. Naruto looked at his friends and saw the fear in their eyes. Not only did their enemy outnumber them and consist of powerful warriors, but they were also more concerned about their hatred. But he couldn't stop. For years, he had dreamed of this moment when he would finally avenge his brother. And now that he had arrived, I couldn't worry about anything else. Not for the clan, not for the fate of his new alliance with the Hitaki or Yamanaka clans, not even for his friends. All I could see, all I could feel was hate. He saw them still staring at him expectantly, waiting for their last order before marching into battle. The memories of his worst nightmare came back to haunt him. Before his eyes, he saw an ungodly fire burning on the grounds of the sacred temple, the sound of men, women, and children pleading and screaming in pain. The fetid air that had lurked in the skies that night, the memory of a child in the middle of a horrible nightmare. Those words that he heard that night and that tormented him all the following days, the ones that he murmured 1,000 times in sleepless nights. Matalos todos. He saw them all freeze, but as a test of their courage, they all nodded before all but one disappeared to carry out his orders. But her eyes were fixed on him, absorbing the haunting look in his eyes as he relived the 2 worst nightmares of his life. Days he would never forget in his entire life. He didn't stop her when she came over and gave him a passionate kiss on the lips, which he hesitantly reciprocated. It was brief, and as they parted, there was a silent plea in their eyes. No words were spoken, but he could still hear her desire in her eyes. Stay alive. He did not respond or give any sign of having heard her or having accepted her request. Mikoto nodded with a sigh before kissing him one last time before disappearing to do her duty. When he turned to face the battlefield, all emotions and feelings disappeared from his eyes. He had no remorse or hesitation in his heart about what he was about to do. Because he was no hero. He was a selfish person who only wanted to fulfill the desires of his own heart. He was the kin killer. He was the cursed man. Tobirama Senju lay crouched on the ground, with one finger resting on the soft grass. His closed eyes showed his level of concentration as his allies lay anxiously around him. When he opened his eyes, he saw the worried look of his little brother Itama staring at him. Their flanks are too strong, but the central formation seems fragile, suggested the white-haired Senju. Then let me attack them and tear them to pieces, Akio Inuzuka said with a wild smile, but he was shocked when Tobirama shook his head. You will take the left flank and Sasuke Sarutobi the right. I, Itama, along with the Senju and some Akimichi, will attack the core formation. Whichever side manages to break through has orders to head straight to the village and catch up with the leader of the Yamanaka clan, and if possible, even the leader of the Hitaki clan, also captive. Hashirama wants them alive and unharmed, you know? Tobirama asked coldly, fixing his cold gaze on the heir Inuzuka, who glared at him. They are traitors. A sharp burst of killing intent caused the dog warrior and his battle companion to shudder as Tobirama's gaze fell upon them in full force. Do you want to test Hashirama's patience? He watched with satisfaction as almost everyone cowered in fear, for they all knew the power of Hashirama. The chief of the Senju clan was a kind and honorable man, but he was quick to deal with anyone who disobeyed him. Understood, they all said in unison, some with great reluctance, earning a stiff nod from Tobirama. As his faction began to split, he saw Itama's pleading eyes, and even when his little brother said nothing, Tobirama understood his request. You will lead the attack with me and take command of our troops on the battlefield, Tobirama ordered. But dash. A firm hand was placed on his shoulder, and Itama Senju saw the grave look in her brother's eyes. I trust you, Itama. Lead the attack while I take care of someone waiting for me. Tobirama explained sincerely. Who? Asked Itama hesitantly. The Kingslayer. Itama froze. He looked his brother in firm eyes and saw no sign of fear or hesitation. Tobirama was the most skilled warrior in his clan after Hashirama, even stronger than Itama and Tsunade. But the Kingslayer was a monster in his own right. Someone who slaughtered an entire clan in single combat, wielder of the Sharingan and the best swordsman in Tierra del Fuego, even among the elemental nations, according to many who had witnessed his prowess. He wasn't someone to be taken lightly, and now his brother was going to confront that man. "Let me help you," pleaded Atama, receiving a quick glance from her older brother. "This is between him and me. The gods know that he hates me for killing his brother. Anyone who tries to stop him by getting in his way to reach me will suffer a brutal death. That's why I'll confront it before it wreaks havoc on our allies. It's your responsibility to break through their lines, and if I fall..." "Brother, listen." Tobarama scolded harshly, but softened at the sight of Atama on the verge of tears. My God, the child was even cuter than Hashirama. Tobarama wondered if trusting his brother would be too heavy a burden for him. But despite his insecurities and shyness, Atama was a good fighter. His people loved him, and he was highly respected. And there was no one Tobarama trusted more than his brother at this time. "If I fall, run. Don't try to save me because they'll only kill you and I can't stand to see you die. Don't waste your life in vain," Tobarama said softly. He still remembered the day he killed Izuna Uchiha on the battlefield. The pain he saw in the Kingslayer's eyes that day promised Tobarama that he would never have peace until he or the Kingslayer died. In a way, I understood Uchiha's feelings in case someone hurt or worse, killed any of her brothers and sisters. Tobarama shuddered as he realized the extent of the rage and hatred that would seep through him if that happened. And the Kingslayer had already lost 3 brothers to the Sinjus. The stronger his love, the stronger his hatred, and the worse his madness. He still remembered his father's words about the Uchiha and the dire warning they contained. That is why Tobarama knew that it was he who had to face the Kingslayer and no one else. Itama nodded reluctantly and was surprised when Tobarama hugged him tightly. There were no words to describe how proud he was of his little brother, for in this world of madness and hatred, this boy was still pure and kind, something that Tobarama wanted with all his might to preserve. They quickly separated when Atama gave the order for the Senju and Akimichi warriors to advance. Tobarama quickly caught Tokusenju before he joined the others. The dark-haired girl looked at him curiously and raised an eyebrow, but saw that the Senju's gaze stopped on her brother's figure. "Take care of it." He didn't overlook the concern for his brother in his voice, and nodded firmly, earning a brief smile. But before he could walk away, he grabbed her hand and made him turn his gaze to her. "Do you have to be you?" he asked sadly. A resigned smile was drawn on his face as he kissed her on the forehead. "It can only be me." Left flank. Itachi and Kagami saw the flock of crows and vultures that had begun to roam the sky, a harbinger of the massacre that was about to occur. They exhaled deeply as the rustle of leaves and grass intensified, heralding the arrival of their enemies. The barking of the dogs reached their eyes, which made them nod in complicity. Looking around, they saw their 400-man force consisting of Hitaki, Uchiha, and some Yamanaka preparing as both members of Kinsguard gave the signal. Itachi had no doubt in his mind that if any of his flanks were crushed, then they would be lost, for the Sinjus and their allies outnumbered his side by quite a bit. Kagami looked suspiciously at the Hitaki and Yamanaka warriors. They might be allies now, but he couldn't shake the feeling of distrust he had towards them, as one of those clans was a former ally of Senju, and the other was about to become one before they were forced to bend the knee to the Uchiha. "If these bastards turn against us," Kagami warned, prompting an expressionless look from Itachi. "We're holding the line," Itachi said, causing Kagami to bite his lip nervously. "Maybe we have to retire," Kagami advised, and was surprised when Itachi shook his head. "The Kindred Guard does not flee from the battlefield." Those words restored Kagami's confidence as he recalled the power of his sworn brothers and sisters. Each of them was worth more than a dozen warriors backing them up, and even if the situation demanded it, they would not flee or retreat. Because Naruto wouldn't, nor would any of his other brothers and sisters. Steeling himself, Kagami nodded as he placed a steady hand on Itachi's shoulders, causing the silent boy to look at him, and Kagami hoped to convey his conviction with his last words before the battle. "We'll stay here," Kagami promised, earning a small smile from Itachi. The two family guards clad in finely crafted bronze armor who bore the dragon symbol on their chests and the Uchiha crests on their backs advanced ahead of their army, their long black cloaks fluttering elegantly behind their backs. Itachi was the first to see Inuzuka dogs charging through the front lines and quickly made a series of hand stamps. Sealing Arts, 7-Star Barrier. Through the dense forests, 7 seals etched into the heart of the trees came to life, and in a matter of seconds, the charging army of dogs came to a screeching halt. His fellow Inuzuka grunted furiously when they saw that some of them also fell into the trap. Itachi charged forward without warning and leapt high into the air, his hands clutching a pile of kunai from his bag. Turning gracefully in the air, he released the entire volley that instantly multiplied into a huge volley that brutally knocked down the trapped enemy forces. The entire enemy front line was decimated, which was the signal Kagami was waiting for when he saw the next wave charging towards them and Itachi's seals disappeared. He gave a powerful roar as his entire body was enveloped in bright blue chakra flames. Kaimon, door of opening. Itachi smiled sarcastically as Kagami disappeared in an instant and appeared right in front of the first Inuzuka, who gasped as he was punched in the head, shattering it. 2 angry dogs leapt at Kagami, but he somersaulted in the air, collapsing against their heads, ending their miserable lives. The Inuzuka, who were known and feared for their taijutsu prowess, were stunned when Kagami began to tear them apart with his swift movements and deadly attacks. Seeing that his friend had destroyed any coordination in the enemy attack, Itachi turned to his shocked allies who had just seen these 2 Kinsguards decimate nearly 24 ninja in the first few minutes on their own, and seemed ready for more. With me, Itachi ordered, raising his sword. Swordsman Hitaki issued his own war cries followed by the stunned Yamanakas, who also joined the charge following Itachi's lead. Soon the 2 factions clashed with each other, initiating a brutal massacre. Right flank. Shursui watched tensely as his forces, made up of nearly 500 fighters, formed in battle. Beside him were Mikoto and Takashi with their swords at the ready. Tension reigned in the air and was further aggravated when the war cries of hundreds of Sarutobi, Akimichi, and some Sunjus reached them. He narrowed his eyes as many Akimichi transformed into massive-sized rolling balls and moved toward his lines at terrifying speeds. But he already expected that from the moment he saw who was leading that attack. They want to break our lines with brute force, Takashi suggested, and saw Shursui nod in acceptance. Take command of our units and wait for my signal, Shursui said, receiving a nod from the younger boy as he quickly joined Yamanaka's units without any protest. Do you think we can hold them back? Asked Mikoto hesitantly. We will. She smiled at Shursui's confidence and had no reason to doubt his resolve, for he was not only a deadly fighter, but someone she wouldn't mind fighting side by side to the death. When the Akimichi began to get dangerously close, causing the ground to tremble with their mass, Shursui raised a seal with one hand, and soon those charging monsters were attacked by hundreds of crows descending from the sky. Shursui had his eyes closed, but Mikoto saw that the Akimichi had come to a screeching halt. Instead of charging forward, the giant monsters retreated and charged in reverse against their own forces, which were screaming in terror. Now, Mikoto nodded instantly as the order escaped Shursui's lips, forcing her to give the signal to her brother. Several Uchiha warriors and some Hitaki warriors joined her to lead the charge, while her twin brother Takashi did the same with the Yamanaka warriors. Together, they formed 2 offensive flanks and charged into the broken enemy lines that were still being ravaged by out-of-control Akimichi fighters. Uchihas, he shouted, causing his brother and his clan members to create an excellent front line. Together, they all performed a series of hand seals very familiar to them at high speed. Few Sarutobi and Sunjus really recognized their movement despite the chaos, and quickly charged forward to counterattack. But they had to start dodging when the few Hitaki who had taken up position in the trees began to rain explosive kunai on them, creating more chaos on the battlefield. Fire style, Great Fire Annihilation. Such a dangerous and powerful jutsu was impossible for any single Uchiha to perform, except for those like Madara. But together they managed to create this movement, and soon the flames that came out of the mouths of their clan members engulfed much of the forest. Men and women screamed, helplessly trapped in the scorching hell. Like headless chickens, they ran, some looking for sources of water. Some even attempted to create water jutsu, but were annihilated by the Hitaki marksmen, who kept raining death from their positions in the tall trees. When the destruction was over, dozens of charred bodies remained, barely recognizable, on the verge of turning to ashes and disappearing forever. Takashi smiled fiercely as he saw Shursui flying through the air on a giant crow, his hands still performing the seal that controlled the uncontrolled Akimichi. But soon, the Jinjutsu master released the jutsu to the great relief of the enemy forces. But it didn't last as the dangerous Uchiha clasped his hands together in a whisper. Jinjutsu, Field of Darkness. When his enemies shouted that they couldn't see anything because a sudden darkness stole every ounce of light from their surroundings, then Takashi cheered, leading the charge of his clan's men. He slashed his first foe in the throat, killing the wretched boy, and watched his clan men begin to slaughter the disorganized enemy forces. However, some enemies had escaped from the Jinjutsu, and Takashi smiled, for there were at least a few capable fighters among them. With a savage battle cry, he and his twin sister attacked them. Formation of the center. Naruto sensed that the enemy was approaching, and there were many. They were more than the forces under his command, but it was to be expected, since he had decided to reinforce his flanks, risking annihilation. With him were most of the Uchiha forces, minus Hitaki's and most of the Yamanakas. Together they formed a powerful army of nearly 300 fighters. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no choice but to fight or risk everything they had won so far. He tightly clenched his ancestral sword as the first enemy forces entered his field of vision. Activating his Sharingan, he charged forward and smiled sarcastically as he plunged the sword into the heart of a shocked Senju. The battlefield came alive as his supporters and foes clashed in open combat. Weapons, jutsu, and body parts flew along with the bloody screams of the dead and dying. Lightning launch, thunder armor. His entire body was covered in bright sparks that savagely electrocuted the Sunjus that were close by. His own ancestral sword was now clad in the element. That is why he loved the weapon, for not only was it made of the finest steel, but it was also engraved with secret seals that allowed it to manifest the type of chakra its wielder used. With a smile, he attacked anyone who dared to challenge him. His sword, now pierced by lightning, pierced through the armor of his enemies like a knife cutting butter, and was unfazed as they died, one after another, screaming in agony. He saw a unit of his clan men being brutally attacked by dozens of Senju. He quickly formed a hand seal, producing 2 of his shadow clones who quietly ran to help his clan men, and soon the Uchihas were counterattacking. Stopping another attack, he delivered a swift and brutal kick to his enemy's genitals. The woman gasped in pain, but her eyes widened as her sword sliced at her open neck, covering it with blood and viscera. Mercilessly, he swung his sword, causing a large wave of lightning to seep into his body. The sun just gasped in horror as their dying kunoichis had exploded, eliciting a wild laugh from the kinslayer. Everyone moved away from him until a one-eyed Senju, dressed in fine armor, charged forward, slamming his sword against Naruto's. He is stronger than the others. Naruto didn't know why, but he sensed that he had seen this Senju before. Despite his innocent appearance, the boy fought with great strength and courage. Roaring once more, he attempted a horizontal slash towards Naruto's chest, but the kinslayer easily dodged the attack by placing his hand on the Senju's back. Itama Senju screamed as fierce lightning bolts attacked him completely. His nerves screamed, his blood boiled, his one eye threatened to burst, and in his blurred vision, he saw the Kingslayer approaching his back with his long sword. Now he knew why Tobirama had warned him not to face that man, but he had forgotten his elder brother's advice when he saw his clanmates being annihilated by that monster. I had to do something to help them. But now he was going to die painfully, which made him close his eyes. Relative killer. Naruto froze in the middle of the attack and had to advance his sword urgently just in time. when Tobirama Senju's sword collided with his. A monstrous chakra blast erupted from the white-haired Senju's body and sent Naruto flying. He quickly regained his balance, turned around and landed gracefully on the battlefield, and saw the man he hated the most standing in front of him. "Little brother," Tobirama whispered, cradling the badly burned Itama in his arms. The sight brought a new wave of sadness and anger to Naruto's heart as he remembered the words spoken to him by the person he had loved the most in this world. "Be happy, little brother." Izuna. Tobirama. The Senju looked up and opened his eyes wide as a monstrous chakra blast erupted from Naruto's body, sending dozens of Sunjus and Sarutobi flying. The killing intent that spread through the forest was enough to make Tobirama shudder, as he saw the inexhaustible hatred in Naruto's eyes that threatened to destroy everything Tobirama held dear. He quickly handed his injured brother to Tuka, who dragged the boy to safety while Tobirama stood up and met the Kinslayer's fiery red eyes. He had seen those same eyes in Madara and knew the power they gave to their wielder. He raised his sword in preparation as Naruto marched towards him, fury and hatred burning in his Sharingan eyes, only to freeze suddenly. An expression of surprise and even more fury was drawn on his face as he looked at the Yamanaka who had attacked his mind. Their eyes widened as the blonde renegades began attacking the shocked Uchiha and Hitaki. The situation changed in a matter of seconds when the traitorous Yamanakas joined the Senju forces and began the massacre of the outnumbered Uchiha and Hitaki forces. He looked at Tobirama, who gave him a blank look. And he knew it. In the midst of the chaos of this surprise attack, everyone, including him, had overlooked a small detail. Barely 2 days had passed since the Yamanaka had officially surrendered to the Uchiha. Even if the Senju had wanted to retaliate, it would have taken them time to gather such a large force. Unless... Tobirama smiled coldly at him. "You guessed right, Kinslayer. The Yamanakas asked for our help the moment you attacked them." Tobirama confessed. "You dash." Naruto struggled, almost on the verge of breaking free of the invading presence in his mind. "They surrendered to you because they knew that fighting would only mean annihilation. So they waited for their allies to arrive, and now they will take revenge. Do you enter their home, slaughter their people, kill the heir to their clan, and expect them to surrender to your insane clan? I see that the Hitakis are still fighting for you despite the change in situation. Tell me, what influence do you have over them?" Tobirama asked knowingly. Naruto didn't dare to reveal any information about the fact that Naori was holding Kiera Hitaki hostage, which was the main reason why the Hitaki were still fighting for them. Thinking of his aunt hiding in that castle among Yamanaka's traitors made his heart stop. He had to save her. Looking around, he saw that most of his supporters had been annihilated by the overwhelming enemy force. The few that remained would not last long. I was trapped. With a savage roar, he broke his attacker's mental invasion and quickly sent a kunai that lodged right in Yamanaka's head and ended the man's life. Hurriedly, he pulled a flare from his pocket and threw it into the air just as Tobirama was attacking him. He smiled even as he slashed swords at Tobirama, as the bright red flare had given the message to his few allies to act on his contingency plan. As for him, he saw hundreds of Sunjus, Sarutobi, and Yamanaks approaching the small circle of Uchiha and Hitaki, who had approached him in hopes that he could save them from their impending deaths. He looked at his archenemy and knew that he had found his rival, for Tobirama was as cruel and cunning as he was. His next words proved Naruto's belief. "You're finished, King